Okay, there's Peter. Good morning. Okay, if you could please stand for the invocation. Pastor Michael Rowe with St. Mary's Church, if you could lead us in prayer this morning.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As St. Paul says, those who are in government are God's servants for the well-being of his people, and so let us pray. O Lord, our governor, whose glory is in all the world, we commend this city to thy merciful care, that being guided by thy providence, we may dwell secure in thy peace. Grant to our mayor and councilors, to all who serve in authority, wisdom and strength to know and do thy will. Fill them with the love of truth and righteousness. Make them ever mindful of their calling to serve this people according to your will, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much.
God bless you.
God bless you. Thank you. Councilwoman Karumba, if you could lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Councilwoman Karumba. Here. Witt. Here. Councilman Slakta. Mayor Simmons.
Here.
Councilman O'Flynn.
Here.
Councilman Gibson. Councilman Forbes.
Here.
Well, good morning, everybody. How are you?
Good morning.
Thank you for being here. We're going to move on now to public comment on agenda items. If you'd like to speak, please come forward at this time. Good morning, Rick.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. This isn't on the agenda, but the Festiva was fabulous. And I could see our mayor let off a little steam. He had a lot of fun. He was dancing with two little kids in his arms. What a fabulous place. I've never seen a better place or a better time in Bonita. And thank you so much for putting that on. Rumor has it that Lee County is going to let dogs on Bonita Beach. I'm not in favor of that at all. So when Larry Kiker comes to town, we could see if we can get Bonita Beach off of their program. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Rick. Good morning, Roger. How are you?
Mr. Mayor, I am sensational this morning.
Fantastic.
I'm not here on an agenda item, but I'm here to thank Council. Good morning, Council. Between Carl and the city staff and the residents of Bonita Springs, we have a traffic light at Lime Tree, and we have North Bay Drive. And I just want to thank the council and you, Mr. Mayor, and of course our city manager, Carl, and all of the staff that helped make that happen. It's just great to see a city like we have, which is such a great city, and we have a perfect situation there where government and the private sector work together within record time to get a traffic light to save lives for the future. And I just am here today on behalf of the residents and the stakeholders on both sides of 41 to thank you all.
Great. Thank you, Roger, and thank you for your leadership with that. Good morning, Bonnie.
Good morning, Mayor, Council, all these good people of the city. I just want to speak a rounding, loud drum beat for what is on 1705-0178 with what we want to do, presented by the Historical Preservation Board. This is probably one of the smartest things we've done recently, is to take this and put it under one umbrella and make it happen, because we know it's a proven concept. It happens all over the United States, other countries as well. So rather than having two Lions Clubs, the Historic Society, the Shangri-La, and the Wonder Gardens, and everybody else doing a point solution, I think this is just an absolute fabulous gain for the city.
Great. Thank you, Bonnie. Good morning, Kathy.
Good morning, everyone. For the record, Kathy McGrath. Let me just go down on the proclamations, 1, 2, 3. First of all, Jason Zaccarino. Congratulations to him, 5 years. I've worked with him the whole time he's here, and you know something? His team, like I've said, are the unsung heroes. They're the behind-the-scenes guys, you know, take care of our 31 parks. They don't just take care of themselves. Clean up, keep them maintained and all. Besides, Jason is the caretaker at the Nature Place, which is near and dear to my heart. He's the best thing that ever happened there. Congratulations to him. The next, Frank Lyles. What can I say about Frank and all he's been involved in? So congratulations to him, too. And Bob DePisa. Bob has been on the Special Events Committee since before I was on it, and he is going to be missed. But fortunately, with the electronic, the way they are now on the internet, he will still be able to handle our T-shirts, so we're grateful for that. We couldn't do without him.
Can't live without those T-shirts, can we, Kathy?
Well, I never see you wearing them. I'm going to put one over your head. And lastly, I just want to make a quick comment on item E, which is the turns on Tennessee Street. You know, I went to all the workshops, and I wasn't a business owner there. I didn't pay attention to that, but you know, they are suffering, and so I don't know what the presentation is going to be, but all I'm saying is I want you all to, when you make your decision, make it as if you were the business owner there, and what would you want done so that your clients and people and customers could egress and access and come and go safely. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Other members of the public?
Well, my name is Bruce Hogue.
Good morning, Bruce.
Good morning.
Welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to be up here to speak with you today. I'd like to also thank Mr. Forbes personally for all of his work that he's done to help us on the Tennessee project. I just want to say I strongly urge the City Council to eliminate the nightmare at Tennessee Street in Old US 41 and choose one of the options being presented to you by the Wright Construction Company today. Not only for convenience, but most importantly for safety. If this road is left the way it is right now in its current condition, I'm sure it's just going to be a matter of time before someone gets killed or seriously hurt. So I thank you for your time and consideration.
Great. Thank you. Well, good morning, Beverly.
Good morning. For the record, my name is Beverly Grady with Russell and Andrews, and I'm representing T&R Properties, and we are here on the proclamation and presentation, item 6G, and there's a PowerPoint attached, and so really we can't specifically comment probably until after the presentation is actually presented. There's just a number of bullet points. However, what we would be requesting of the council in any of your proposed land development code amendments that you respect the rights that have been granted to Anglers Paradise, and that should be recognized in any regulatory scheme should the council deems to pursue. And so we would request that, and then also request some opportunity in the future so we can work with the city on any proposed changes to your land development code. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Bev. Other members of the public? Good morning.
Good morning. I'm Don DeFlavis. I'm a business owner on Tennessee Street, and good morning to the mayor and the council. I've looked at the review of the Tennessee Street situation, what the designers have come up with as a solution, and I think it'd be a really good one for alleviating our problem there with the turning on and off of Old 41. Really appreciate everybody's efforts on that, and hope we can see that through to fruition. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for being here this morning. Michael.
Morning, Mayor.
Morning.
Council. Also would like to comment on item 6G regarding the implementation for the Bonita Beach Road vision study. I would also like an opportunity to comment after the presentation is given, after we get more details about what is found with the Tool Design Group's recommendations. I would also like this council to consider exempting a certain business park on Bonita Beach Road, Burnwood Park of Commerce. I made a presentation to the LPA board last week with respect to the proposed moratorium and requested that the Burnwood Park of Commerce be exempted from that moratorium, and the LPA passed it unanimously that they would exempt or recommend exemption. The reason being is that the Burnwood Park of Commerce is a master plan park. It checks the boxes of most, if not all, of the vision studies goals as it pertains to walkability, bike access, interconnectivity, reduction of traffic, and access to mass transit and public transportation. But the focus of the presentation and what the LPA agreed with is that the park is currently 50% built out, with more buildings coming out of the ground. The park has covenants and deed restrictions in place to make the buildings interconnected and to reduce traffic per the traffic impact statement for the park, which is concurrent. The developer of the park has already spent considerable monies to ensure connectivity with multiple full median cuts and reverse frontage roads, as well as granting an easement along the entire northern boundary of the park where there is an existing sidewalk. And we also have a bus stop at the Publix at Bonita Grand. So I would like to comment after the presentation is given, and I would request that the council exempt the Park of Commerce. Thank you.
Great, thank you. You're up. Good morning.
Hi, I'm Mary Beth Anders. I'm a CPA on Tennessee Road, Tennessee Street, Bruce Hoag's building. And again, I want to reiterate that I have lots of people in and out of the office between January and April 15th. Almost everybody was just beside themselves, and so many elderly people with really difficulties, because when we first saw this going in and mentioned, when we saw the curb and realized, because of course we've all been doing detours down Old 41 for months at that point. So we were pretty familiar with the detours. All of a sudden it's like, what the heck is this? And we called and we were told, you know, that they had done a traffic study and that's what had happened. So as far as not attending meetings, I think that I speak for everybody, and that by that time, it was too late when we realized what was happening. As far as the meetings, when they were first going on, this was not this council, but I heard about some of those meetings because I'm a bit of a rabble-rouser. And I am glad I wasn't in those meetings, because I would probably be in jail, because from what I understand, people were pretty much discounted. There were 200 people in that meeting at that fire hall, and they were shut down when they were opposing the project. The project has turned out pretty. But here's the thing that really is that I don't understand, is there was an error made at our road, because if a truck can't turn on the road, it is a design error. The whole thing is flawed, and yet we're getting presentations about how much it's going to cost the city of Bonita Springs to fix an error. In my professional career, when I make an error, I fix the error. I pay for the error if it costs my client anything because of my error. So I'm kind of wondering why they just don't fix it and say, hey, we made a mistake. So, but I do thank the city council for listening to us and for alleviating us of this dangerous problem. Thank you so much.
Appreciate your thoughts. Thank you very much. Other members of the public? Seeing none, we're going to move on to proclamations and presentations. If Jason Giaccarino could come up, please. Welcome. How you doing?
Very good. Council?
Good morning. How are you?
Wonderful.
Thanks
for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. You know where this place is? You've been here before?
A couple times.
Well, Jason, this is a 5 years of service award presented to Jason Giaccarino as of the second day of May 2017 in appreciation and recognition for the 5 years of service, outstanding public service, I might add, to the city of Bonita Springs. Signed Mayor Peter Simmons and City Manager Carl Schweng. Congratulations and thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you all. It's a pleasure every day for me to actually work for the city. I'm one of the lucky people in the world that enjoy my job every day, no matter how crazy Carl and Nicole like to make it for us.
Oh, thank you very much.
And I'd also just like a quick thank you to my staff. I could not do my job without my staff being so capable and flexible to do theirs. So I would personally like to thank all of them: Scott Cavill, Lionel Garcia, Nathaniel Woods, Dwayne Abney, Michael Williams, and our newest guy, Richard Moses. So thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Frank Lyles. Is Frank here? There he is. Frank, good morning. Last time I saw you, you called me by another name, but here. Good to see you, buddy. How you doing? I'm glad you're feeling better, by the way. Absolutely, yes. This is a certificate of appreciation presented to Frank Lyles for his 6 years of service to the citizens of Bonita Springs as a member of the City of Bonita Springs Board for Land Use Hearings and Adjustments and Zoning Board of Appeals, signed Mayor Peter Simmons, May 17th, 2017. Thank you very much, Frank. You want to say anything? Thank you. Thank you, Frank. Bob DePisa. And last but not least, Bob DePisa. Good morning, how are you? Nice to see you. Nice to see you. This is a certificate of appreciation presented to Bob DePisa in appreciation for your service to the City of Bonita Springs special events. Signed Mayor Peter Simmons, May 17th, 2017. Thank you, Bob.
It's been my pleasure to assist. It's been a great several years, so thank you very much.
Great. Where are you from originally? I parked my car. Yeah, I parked my car in New Hampshire, you know. All right. Celtics got the #1 pick in the lottery. Great, thank you. If we could now have Tommy Doyle, Supervisor of Elections, and his team, please come forward. We're going to review the agreement for election services and associated costs of holding an election.
Thank you, Mayor. And
they're not free,
Council.
Tommy? Welcome.
They're not free.
They're not free.
That's what the state says.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'd like to introduce my Chief of Operations, Chief Deputy Lee Carr, and Chief of Administration, Bernie Feliciano.
Great.
They're my bodyguards, and I hope you won't beat us up too bad. But the contract is just the renewal of a contract that puts my name on the contract instead of the predecessor, basically.
Right.
I know there was a sticker shock on our estimate, which it's just an estimate, and we don't want you to be surprised at the end of the election. This is the first really estimate that's been line item out over the years. They've estimated per voter, and if anybody's been in business, that doesn't work. So we put a line item on every event. We're still absorbing costs through our staff, staff assistants, and all the staff time that we have in our office. But other than that, if you got any questions, we're here to answer them.
Great. Thank you very much, and thank you for being here. It's actually a pleasure to welcome you here, Tommy, and your team. Actually, I think first time officially as your Supervisor of Elections,
Yes,
so thank you. Council? Yes, Amy.
These numbers on the front where it says the election, the March 20th election and the early voting, that would be additive, right?
The early voting costs, you have 1 day. That's an option you can take out.
So,
Just
but if you put those two together, they're basically the
correct.
same.
Correct.
I mean, either going by mail ballot or is that?
No, the cost of that we did an estimate for vote by mail only.
Right.
In case you want to do a referendum by mail.
Right.
And that we were all surprised when we line item that out. It came in as much as a election day vote.
Okay, but if we had just a normal election where we would have precinct voting plus we'd have some mail-in ability, how much would it cost?
Wait, you're looking at right at, it's
looking at the-
127 plus 18,000, so.
All right.
Yeah.
I just add that the price and the estimate here, as I understand it, is only if all precincts have to be open. So
Correct.
let's say the election, we don't have a referendum question, so you have 1, 3, 5, and nobody runs against Councilmember Carumba or Councilmember
Why would they?
Gibson. Well, because.
I'm kidding, I'm kidding.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Councilman Slackta is termed out, so we have to have an election there. Then it would be substantially less than the number that was.
Correct, that's correct. I had a thought there, but when you said that, yeah, well, it's based on the precincts that we got to man, that we got to, the amount of poll workers you got to train. So if we're not using all the precincts, the cost does drop quite a bit.
Right.
Does this, sorry.
I was going to say, Amy, are you done?
Just one more question. So now we don't have to decide whether we want to change the date of our elections to coincide with the other communities. We could do that at a later date, but probably for the upcoming one that we have scheduled for March, we probably should leave that.
That's, right
Good
now,
question.
we have the city of Fort Myers and Cape Coral, they do the fall elections. And I think this was approached by, about the city of Bonita to have their elections simultaneously. With that, you would share a lot of costs.
Right.
And would probably drop the cost quite a bit.
Right.
So that's something you can do now,
Or we
but
could
it's problematic if you do it now.
Is it?
It's a little bit. I
Okay.
think Audrey
We would
can
have to
explain that
pretty
more
much,
to you.
Because pretty much the polls close about 60 days prior to the election.
Yeah.
We would have to have resolutions and be a very short ability for people to either challenge you or,
So
for
we
voting
should-
pool and.
Well,
And for running.
we would consider that for the following election,
Yeah, the off election year.
the off
Good.
election.
Yes.
So we probably should do
And
that
then
as
if we
a
can get, if
council.
we can get all the cities on board
Yeah,
on
right.
the off years, it'd be great. Do it all at one time.
Correct.
And it'll help our staff out
Mm-hmm.
and make things run really smooth.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, great.
Thank
Amy,
you.
anything
No,
else?
that's it.
Greg?
I just had one question, Tommy. Basically, does this include any early voting at the supervisor of elections?
That's one site for early voting at the supervised
A
elections
week
branch.
and for the whole week, or is it one?
I think it's for what, how many?
1 week? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Wait, Peter?
Now, just wonder, who sets the protocols for staffing when you go in and you see people there? Is that a statewide thing, or is that your own best practices?
It's our best practices.
Best
Lee
practices.
is our chief of operations. She handles all the staffing, the training, and most of the poll workers are, they just come in during elections. We train them and we try to find people in your area so they don't have to travel.
Right. Okay, thanks.
Mike?
I'm good.
Fred?
I'm good.
Okay. I had a question, and I see it, I see the numbers, and we've touched on it. We're obviously talking hypotheticals because we don't know what the races are going to look like in 1, 3, and 5. What would be extra if we were to have a referendum question? Either I don't know
If you do it during the election,
Right. In other words, so we'd have to
Well-
open up precincts 2, 4, and 6. Yeah, so bottom line, it'd be citywide as opposed to 3.
yeah, citywide. If we have it during the election, there's not a whole lot of difference in cost because, maybe the translation into Spanish is a cost. Is there anything else?
No, and I'm sorry to split hairs, but you're saying during the election. So in other words, if we were to have a citywide on the day that we're scheduled for here, normally it would not be that much more.
Right.
But
But if
if-
you do a separate,
Audrey?
If it's
Please.
all
No.
if all
Please. I
precincts
want to
are-
hear what he has to say. Thank you.
say
Yes.
that again.
Yeah, no, I just want to hear, because I've been hearing conflicting reports.
Well, I'm saying
'Cause I've
if you
asked this
ha-
before.
if you have a referendum on your election that you got scheduled now,
Right.
then there's not a whole lot of added cost. If you have an election citywide with a referendum on it besides that, yeah, it's going to be the same amount of money. It's going to be an extra. Yes, you can.
Yes. Yes, please, absolutely. Come on, yes, please come on over to the, step up to the mic. Thank you, Bernie.
Your election in 2018 is districts 1, 3, and 5.
Correct.
That's 6 precincts. So your election would be based on 6 precincts. If you put a referendum on the ballot in 2018, that's going to open up your election to 11 precincts, and it's citywide.
Right.
The cost would be the
11,000 per precinct.
11,000 per precinct.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so for your 2018 election, if you just leave your 2018 election at districts 1, 3, and 5,
Right.
you're paying for 6 precincts plus early voting if you're going to add early voting as part of your election package.
Right.
If you wait till 2020 to put referendums on the ballot, you would be going on at the presidential preference primary election if you don't decide to change your election cycle in the 2019 election cycle to coincide with Cape Coral and Fort Myers. So if you go to 2020 and you put your referendums on at the presidential preference primary election, that is already a regularly scheduled county-wide election, and your election would be citywide, and it would essentially mirror to some degree your 2016 election costs.
Okay.
So you would be paying ballot translation language
Great.
for any referendums that you would put on the ballot.
Okay.
Okay, does,
Yeah, and I was going to say, and if, whenever, and it certainly wouldn't be that pressing, but at your convenience, if you could somebody send me a memo on that or just a one-pager on that, that'd be fantastic.
okay,
Thank you very much.
you're welcome.
So just
and-
just a quick
Yeah.
follow-up question on that, Bernie, a quick follow-up. So I think I heard you say that, so there's a fixed cost for early voting. That's not going to vary depending upon how many
It would
precincts?
vary depending on the number. If you decided to designate an additional site,
No, if you didn't.
if you didn't, that would
Would not.
be that would be pretty close what we quoted in the estimate.
Right. So it sounds like the additional cost is 5 times 11.
That's an estimate, yes.
Yeah, as an estimate.
Yes.
Well,
Citywide versus, you said
Citywide.
6
he's
precinct-
talking about early voting.
No,
Oh, okay. I
Thank
thought
you,
he meant
Tommy.
early
Change,
voting.
change,
Okay,
yeah.
all right.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
back to the question he was asking.
Okay.
That's what I'm on.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Right. And on the early voting, that estimate is for 6 days. The city can certainly provide for longer than 6 days. You can provide for 8. You could provide for 10. But typically, municipalities will provide for either 1 week or 2 weeks of early voting. So if you added more days to the early voting and you wanted to stretch it out to 8 or 10, then of course that estimate would change for early voting.
Right. Is there a state, I mean, I'm all about voting, obviously, but I mean, is there a state minimum, state mandated minimum for early voting days?
For municipalities, a municipality has the option to provide or to not provide for early voting.
Okay.
Like
And-
Estero in their last election, which they ended up not having, voted against early
Right, they
voting.
opted to not authorize early voting, which they certainly can do. Town of Fort Myers Beach has it incorporated into their charter that they shall not provide for early voting. And Sanibel does not provide for early voting. So it's not unusual for a municipality to not provide for early voting, but what might be unusual in your future elections is to have provided it all this time for your voters and then to decide to not authorize it
Right.
after it's been provided throughout all of your election
But
cycles.
vote by mail is a different thing, right?
Right, well, there's vote by mail and then there are mail ballot elections. Mail ballot election is completely different from vote by mail.
Right, but vote by mail, that you do have, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, in every election, yeah. You would not be able to say we're not going to authorize vote by mail because statutorily, voters are entitled to be able to vote by mail if they choose to.
Because, I mean, the big, obviously the trend is vote by mail, and it's reduced the early voting. Well, cause and effect is a different issue, right? But early voting's come down, vote by mail's gone way up.
Yes, vote by mail has excelled in Lee County over
Especially
the
here.
last 2 election cycles.
Right. Great. Greg and then Amy.
Kind of just harping on this, I hate to use the word harping, talking about the early voting. If in 2020 the county wants to do early voting for 2 weeks, we would not absorb that cost, or would we still absorb it?
No, you would not.
Okay.
Great. Amy?
Well,
Thanks,
in
Greg.
2020, it's the case if you have an election at that time, then it wouldn't be a cost to the municipality because that would be absorbed by Lee County, right?
Right.
So if we were to have a.
Unless it's a referendum.
Well, no, if we had a referendum that was citywide, we would just get together with what other Lee County is doing, and then we wouldn't pay for the election.
Right,
Other
you-
than minimal kinds of things.
Right, you could still put your referendum on the ballot.
Right.
But for your referendum on the ballot at a regularly scheduled countywide election, you would incur the cost for ballot translation language, and you would also incur probably a nominal fee for proofing, for ballot proofing for your referendum.
So it just council, it seems to me we need to look into sort of things to try to coordinate some kind of
Right.
cost savings plus what our needs are, and if it's possible,
Right.
integrate with what the county is doing. But if we have a need to do something, we should do it and just spend the money, but we need a little discussion about it.
No, I absolutely
you know?
agree with you,
And
Amy.
we might have to change the terms and all that stuff, so it's,
Sure.
we have to do some work.
No, absolutely, I agree, and certainly no fault of
no,
Tommy
that-
Doyle and his team, but issues that are ripe
Correct.
for voting on, and we're hamstrung because we got to wait another 2 years
Mm-hmm.
when we have a citywide election, right? There needs to be a happy medium there for a citywide vote on issues
Right.
that are ripe
Correct.
to be decided, that don't have to, wait a
Right. couple
of years before you have a situation that you haven't been able to vote in a timely manner on. Peter?
Well, we have the brain trust here, if I can get a freebie. How does it work with the county? In other words, when the county schedules elections, do they get charged, or is that part, as a constitutional officer, that's
Part of our.
that's baked in?
It's baked in our budget.
That's baked
yes.
in. All right. So, okay, thank you.
Mike, Fred, anything else? No? Tommy and your team, anything else?
Well, I got only one little comment that City of Fort Myers also had sticker shock, so you're not alone.
Well, is there any way to bake in the municipalities?
That's something I think it's up to the state and the Board of County Commissioners. That we
Interesting.
You'd have to, they'll have to make that decision.
Right.
Great. Anything else? Thank you very much
All
for
right.
being here.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Tommy, if you'd come up, I want to have somebody take a picture of you and the team here. I don't know how we best assemble, but.
Go down there?
Yeah, let's go down, actually. You guys don't mind? Towards the center, yes, sir.
I want him to sign him before he leaves. I appreciate
Good, this is fantastic.
Three of them there. Here's an ink pen for him.
Yeah.
He's not here today, so.
All right, real quick. 1, 2, 3. I got that one. Kendra? One more. Make sure you get Tommy's inside. Yeah, there's an official. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Before you leave, you guys can all go back. I need you to either approve the agreement, and maybe while I have Supervisor Doyle here, he can do his signatures.
Yes, yes. Well, yeah.
So if you, I'm sorry, I'm kind of
No, that's
people-oriented.
okay.
Just like to talk, we don't like to. We want to make approval, I guess.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, further discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilman DeWitt?
Aye.
Mayor Simmons?
Aye.
Councilman O'Flynn?
Aye.
Councilman Gibson?
Aye.
Councilman Forbes?
Aye.
Councilwoman Carumba?
Aye.
Great, wonderful. Thank you very much, Tommy, to you and your team. Okay, moving on now. We're going to move on to item E, a presentation from Wright Construction as requested by City Council for design alternative options for the Tennessee Street and Old 41 median turn lane, green sheet 17-05-0181. Good morning.
Good morning. For the record, my name is Norman Trebelcock. I'm a certified planner and professional engineer, and I am a part of the Wright construction team for the project, and here to present things and just follow up on the last meeting we had with you all. So just starting out, the picture that you see in front of you is really the existing conditions where we developed the median island and also the triangle island for folks to cross safely. Just kind of follow up, summarize things is that, the reason for the changes was the sharp angle with Old 41 and creating a safe haven for pedestrians with the triangular island. One of the impacts is the median that was introduced prevented northbound lefts from coming out, again, to address that sharp angle and folks having to look over their shoulder to make a left out. This was presented at the workshops without receiving any additional comments. And we also had identified the public alley improvements as a potential cost-effective enhancement to accommodate full movements and maintain current design benefits. But in our discussion with you all, really that came out well is looking at returning things really back to the pre-construction condition. But this is just a kind of a summary of conditions that are built. You can see the triangular island there and then the alley and such. But really what we're proposed based on guidance from you all from our last meeting was to look at this full median opening and look at just a couple options relative to that. So that's what we've done here is to really kind of return it back to where it was so that it allows really full movements. Anybody heading south can take a right. Anybody heading out can take a right out there, but also allows the left in and then the left out as well. And so, and then before you are really kind of a couple options. This is where we do retain some of the design elements of the project where we have a depressed median pavers and then also a paver sidewalk crossing as well to kind of keep some of the design elements in place with the project. And this is kind of just a picture of the couple options. This is the depressed paver median versus a striped median there for you as well. And so with that in mind, based on your guidance, we've coming back to you with a proposed open median option for you to consider. And then just to cover the costs for doing that, with the full pavers was $60,000, and then with doing just a striped crosswalk would be the $50,000 cost to modify things. And with that, I'm available for any questions or comments you may have.
Great. Thank you very much.
Yes,
and
sir. Mm-hmm.
Not to be too partial, but Fred, I'd like to start with you because I know you've been highly involved with this, and
almost by accident.
and he's eating all those donuts down there by himself. So if anybody would like a donut, we do have donuts down at this. He's got sticky hands, I think.
I favor
sticky fingers. Yeah.
I favor the solution that still maintains some of the design conditions. I mean, the visual appearance of the street. Mm-hmm. I think it'd be a tragic mistake to not have the pavers and the other things.
Right.
And all that. But I do think the idea of making the median level more or less with the road so that semis and what have you can swing out wide to make that 135-degree turn if you're southbound.
Right.
Is what you have to do.
Right. And I hate to, obviously, that what you showed us would allow that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it allows the movements to the extent that really they are allowed before. I mean, the bigger trucks, they do have to swing out into the opposing lane, that kind of thing.
I mean, they're really going to be at a creep, if you will, to make the turn. But they did. But it was that way prior, correct?
Exactly. It's the same type of condition. And just to consider too for us all is we do have the arterial Bonita Beach Road that really and using Industrial Street would be an appropriate option for folks too in terms of making their full truck movements and things. But this does take care of the more direct issues in terms of the business owners that had come up to you about their cars and their customers and those things. But it also does accommodate the trucks as well, but to the same extent before. So thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Fred. Anything further?
No, I think it's important for everyone to realize that the reason they can't improve the intersection further, it would require the either buying or taking of property, which would virtually destroy one of the businesses on the corner there. So it's if you go beyond this, it would get prohibitively expensive.
Yes, good point. Yeah, thank you.
Right.
Yes, sir.
Mike? As long as we're going back to what we had before, so we can get the truck movements in, and I agree it should retain the pavers. That way we have the same look as the rest of the downtown.
Yes.
So great, thank you. Peter?
No, I agree with Fred.
Okay. Greg?
Same thing, I agree with Fred. I would want to keep the same look as we got going down the whole.
Ditto? Is that where we're hearing ditto? Amy?
It's ditto for me. I just have one question.
Yes, ma'am.
On the last presentation you gave, you talked about the trucks using the alley. Is that out of the question now, or would that be any more helpful to at least give some of the trucks the option to go down the alley and then go south on 41 further on?
Good point.
No,
I mean,
well,
what's the function? Is the alley just out of the question right now? Not to use it as an alternative, but as an addition to this.
It can be, but realistically, once you open up this
Then they're all gonna
intersection,
go
the
that
folks
way.
are really going to use that. That's the path of least resistance.
Okay.
Yes, to your point. Yeah.
Because I think it would be good not to have trucks going down 41 and making that turn right where we have it, even though we're
Right.
accommodating them.
Right.
And so if there was a better way or an alternative way that we could encourage them to go, I'd like to explore that also.
Mm-hmm.
It's not feasible. I mean, why can't they why can't they go down the alley? They can't make the turn there
Well,
either?
the alleys, I mean, there is, again, there is that option of using the external streets. I mean, you can use Bonita Beach Road. That's really an arterial roadway that can give you the movements.
They can't get to Bonita Beach Road from, how would they get there?
There are different ways to do that, and to be able to get there. And then, the alley really kind of would function more for, cars and what we call single unit trucks, just because, but it can be improved a bit. You're right, with, some radius improvements and the like. And so you can afford, I mean, there is an alternative for the full movements, but it wouldn't be off of Old 41. And I think the direction that you all were looking at overall is you really wanted to kind of accommodate the traffic the way it was before in this particular instance. So this does exactly what you're looking for there. What we had before with modifications could accommodate it, but just in a different manner. But I think, listening to the business owners and the like and yourself, we're just returning it back to that state.
No, I understand that. Do you think it's worthwhile exploring, because isn't there a building, my directions are off, but there's a business that has a lot of trucks that they are speaking to these semis that come in there, that's next or close to that alley. That was where that business was, isn't it?
Well, there's several businesses. A couple of the folks that did speak really were kind of off of Industrial Street there, that really would use Tennessee. So I think as proposed, it probably best accommodates their needs based on what they've identified and the feedback we've received.
We don't need this extra relief valve for the trucks. Is that what you're saying?
No, you wouldn't. Once you return it to that, you wouldn't. With the other concept, it would make a lot more sense to do those improvements. But it's up to you all. If you want to make those two, you can.
Yeah. So it's not. This is the alley. Where's the alley?
I can show you.
While you're looking at that, Amy,
there's
Fred?
the alley there.
Here we go, Amy. It's up on the screen.
There, right there.
Yeah.
So that's the alley you're talking about.
Right.
And so the improvements, I mean, and you can do those in addition to, I mean, because it is a piece of infrastructure, but it really becomes a moot point. Once you open this up, then the folks would prefer just to go this
That
way
alley
versus
just
going
gets
here
over the
and
same
turning
thing.
here
Okay,
and the
thank
like. That's all. But
Okay.
that was an alternative to leave that alone and then just improve the alley. And then the trucks really get accommodated through the external system, and that was really the original vision. But listening to all the different folks and their feedback to you all, you said, hey, no, let's go a different direction, and that's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Great. Fred?
Well, I'm just going to offer a couple comments or isn't the alley roughly 20 feet between the buildings?
Well, the alley's actually, 20-foot width there, so it
And
gets.
don't the doors open into the alley?
No, well, there is a, there is like there's a sidewalk area there, and then you have that 20 feet, but it is tight, you're right. And there's been a fair amount of occupation there, so there would be a bit of undoing, and so that's why I think you've looked at saying, hey, let's just open up the road, and that's fine. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Council?
I make a motion, can we do that?
Yeah,
now?
I think we can make a motion. And I know there's not a opportunity here for feedback from the residents down there, but I hate to say go off the wall here and let them speak, but if you wouldn't mind, okay? I'd just like to hear from the folks that spoke this morning.
Sure.
If they'd like to come up, and I'll tell you what, let's make a motion, Fred.
Second.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second. Is there
Have
further
discussion.
discussion by council at this time?
Yeah, I make a motion that we accept the proposal of Wright Construction to kind of put the intersection back to its original plan view, but with the design visual enhancements that the project has.
Right. Okay. and then
Paver treatment, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but just the paver treatment,
Right.
yes. Mhm.
And there's been a second to that, and now there's not further discussion by the council at this moment, but I would like to hear from the folks that are here this morning, please, if you could come forward. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, maybe you don't feel like you have to say anything. I just wanted to welcome the opportunity.
I just want to say that as long as we can get it back to its original state or somewhere very close to that, we've lived with that now for 30, 40 years. So I can't see any reason why we can't live with it into the future.
Great. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I also believe that the design would take care of what our main issues are there, and I agree with everybody as far as the paver would keep the same flavor of the rest of the project, so I'm in favor of it.
Okay, wonderful. Oh, I'm sorry. Can you folks state your names again, or give them to Audrey, either way?
Don DeFlavis.
Great. Sorry about that. I know you introduced yourselves earlier.
Bruce Hogue.
Great. Thank you, Bruce. Anybody else? Alex, you want to say something about Tennessee Street? Okay.
I'm just looking at pedestrian safety crossing. I'm just wondering, could you have one of those light signs like you have on Old 41, so in case a for pedestrian safety along that street, since you're taking out the island, the yellow placard with the blinking.
Okay.
You may want to put that there for I don't know how much pedestrian traffic is there, but there are, just the
Great.
safety thought.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you. Okay. Anything else at this time? There's been a motion and a second. Do you have anything else to add?
Just on that last comment, there is stop control there, so the cars would stop, so that really wouldn't warrant the flasher thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Council, further discussion? Okay. Roll call, please.
Mayor Simmons.
Aye.
Councilman O'Flynn.
Aye.
Councilman Gibson.
Aye.
Councilman Forbes.
Aye.
Councilwoman Carumba.
Aye.
Councilman DeWitt.
Aye.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, you're welcome.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to item F, a presentation on behalf of the Historic Preservation Board regarding the quote-unquote historic village concept and direction to staff relative to the same. Green sheet number 17-05-178. Good morning, Dallas.
Good morning, Mayor, Council, staff. For the record, my name is Dallas Reward. I am the chairman of the Historic Preservation Board. We are here this morning to bring a village concept to you all. I spoke to each of you individually a while back and said that we would bring this back. We brought it to the formal council. With the historic village concept, the downtown redevelopment is in place. We feel like you need to bring some attraction there to bring some people downtown. I think a historic village is a great opportunity to do that. Historic tourism is great in the nation now. So we really want to bring that village to downtown Bonita Springs. So we're looking for direction on whether you think we should move forward with this. We're looking at grants to help fund a study to see if it warrants it. So I have a few board members here of the Historic Preservation. I'd like to introduce them.
Great.
We have Alex Grant, Vice Chair Rhonda Lawhorn, and Jay Welch. And Jay's going to talk a little bit about the historic village concept. He's very familiar with this. He's done it in other cities nationally and internationally. So I will introduce Jay and let him give the presentation.
Great. Thank you very much. Good morning. Welcome.
Good morning, City Council, Mayor Simmons. We've met before, but
yes. I was going to say, yeah, just
okay. Let me give you a brief background because we might not know each other. My name is Jay Welch. I'm an architect and project developer, and I had the opportunity and honor.
You can say just a little bit more on that microphone.
This?
I know it's tricky. But
That's better?
I
Okay.
think so, yes.
So let me start over again? Okay, good.
Yeah, from the beginning,
So,
please.
I had the opportunity and honor to work with the Historic Preservation Board.
There you go.
And thus be an advisor to the city in terms of historic values here in Bonita Springs. Let me begin with just a brief quote by one of our former presidents. People without the knowledge of their past history and culture is like a tree without roots. We will be remembered more for what we preserve than for what we tear down. And this is what historic preservation is all about, and this is what we work for. There's a distinction, and I want to address that real quickly, between a historic district and a historic village. Historic district is what the city of Bonita Springs is working on very good for many years. To establish a historic district is something that usually takes 10, 15, 20 years, depending on many aspects. A historic village is an isolated project and usually gets implemented within a time window of 3 to 5 years. So it's a whole different avenue. We have different options how to implement a historic village. One option stood out after extensively evaluating the given options that we have. So we've been working on that for many years now. You can set it up as a museum, you can set it up as a village-like museum, or you can create a structure mix. In our case, we would recommend a combination with an art park, and this is the approach number 3 in the documentation that you all have. This structure mix is realistically plannable, it is profitable, and it is promising in terms of a trans-regional level of awareness. A structure mix accommodates better and maybe larger leaseholders because we need to see the difference between historic villages like we would see on Sanibel Islands, these would be museums, or economically developed villages where you have the combination of old structures that you show to the public and also accommodate interesting leaseholders. The art park, as described in approach number 3 in the documentation, enhances the attractiveness of the project for both the public and the tenants or businesses. This whole project would significantly increase the reputation of Bonita Springs beyond Southwest Florida. These pictures show structure mixes in many kinds, and you will see that if we import several old structures into this historic village, and at this point we haven't settled on a number that we would propose, it could range somewhere between maybe 20, 30, 50 old structures. In most of the cases, these old structures, old cottages or whatever it is, will be too small to accommodate interesting tenants, like interesting businesses. So you will have to find a way to enlarge these small structures. And the common way to do that is to combine contemporary elements with old structures. You can combine several, for example, old cottages with modern elements, or you can add modern structures to that as well. So that being said, kind of describes the structure mix that we were talking about, and you know, this is basically what the slideshow shows. And I think we can, end that at this point. The question is always how to finance a project like that. And the most typical way, or the common way, is to establish maybe a foundation or any other type of suitable entity. The city in these cases is usually the main person, the main shareholder, whereas there will be a number of investors, individual investors, with certain shares. Whereas the investors will import the funds and receive a certain income return depending on how much they brought into that entity. The tenants self-present their business in a one-of-a-kind setting with additional stream of visitors by the art park, with festivals and so forth. So the next step to see if this would be a project for the city of Bonita Springs is to have a professional consultant firm come up with a detailed feasibility study. Such a study includes master plan ideas, calculations of profitability, and associated evaluations. All to convince potential investors of their opportunity to be part of it and help finance the project. This detailed feasibility study is a task or project work of several months. Just to give you an understanding, it's an extensive, ample conceptual project. There will be, we like to call it interim costs or temporary cost to finance that study, and I'll tell you why it's called temporary cost. We had an original amount that we in the board were talking about over the course of several years, and you will find that number in the documentation. By talking more about it, we believe that we can come down with the scope of services, resulting in coming down in that number as well. Whatever the cost will be, it will be on a reimbursement basis, which means when the potential investor or the group of investors is found, they will reimburse any expenses that have occurred at that point. The Historic Preservation Board, with support of the city, has also established a grant committee. The grant committee is working on possible grants, one of which is included in the documentation that you have, just as an example of what is out there to partially fund the cost of the feasibility study project. One way, and this is also part of the enclosed example of grant concept, is to use the funds City Council annually provides for historic preservation to temporarily finance the study project and ideally, perhaps simultaneously, receive additional grants, for example, through a program like you have in your documentation, to continue preserve existing individual structures simultaneously, the way the board, with the support of the city, did that in the last several years. We'll need more time to go into detail, and we would suggest, or we would like to come up after a while and suggest City Council with the best possible options. At this point, I think we, as the Historic Preservation Board, are looking for the direction of City Council to move forward with what we have prepared in the last years. It's actually several years. I spoke here in front of the former City Council exactly 2 years ago. That was in May 2 years ago. And we did a lot of work with the great help of all our board members, which I personally very much appreciate. And we are looking for the direction to move forward, and we'll put more work into both the concept, the preparation of the feasibility study, and ideas to finance that, to come up with viable options to successfully, possibly let this come true. So if there are any questions by City Council, I'll be more than happy to answer that.
Great. Thank you very much. That's a nice presentation. Council? Fred?
Well, I'm in favor of a historic preservation village. The key to the whole thing is the making it conveniently accessible to the people to get to it, and making it, enhancing existing facilities like Wonder Gardens, things that we already have. And what's your plan on that?
We have not gone into a specific site selection, so to speak, at this point, and there are very common reasons for that. The consultant firm, or whoever it is who comes up with that feasibility study, has one of their major tasks to suggest possible sites, because the site or a combination of different properties could either be from the city, like the city could donate sites, or it could be a partial donation. But in many of these cases, it is the situation that the big plot consists also of private properties that the potential group of investors purchases. In terms of the general location, we, as the board, believe that this historic village should be somewhere in the core of downtown to address exactly what you, Mr. Forbes, just said. So it should be part of the historic district, when we were talking about this before. And again, we are not suggesting a historic village like a museum, like you have in Sanibel Island. We are actually suggesting a compound where people go to, where tourists go to. I talked about the reputation that will increase through all that. And businesses, where businesses find places to rent that are much more attractive than other opportunities they would have. Combined with the art park, which is at no cost, it actually enhances young artists as well. It will be an attractor in many aspects.
What do you think the minimum and size site would have to be in acres versus what you'd call the optimum size?
We don't have any acreage in mind at this point, and the reason for that is that if we get the direction to move forward, we will put more thought into the question how many existing historic structures we would see in the village. That will also be something the consultant would address and come up with probably several options in terms of the sizes. But usually these historic villages, and I've been involved in many of these projects over the course of the last 20 years, would accommodate about 20 to 30, maybe 35 historic structures combined with additions or things like that. So this will be determined in the next step.
I personally don't think that we have a lot of land because if even though the city owns a lot of land down there, we've got to convert some of that to income producing property, either by we sell it or we put something on it where we get a tremendous rent. So I think we need more of a compact design that would be a tourist attraction, that we could have buildings. I don't know that we have to have 24 or 30.
Okay.
That's just my thoughts.
Okay. Mike?
I kind of agree. I don't see anywhere that we have room for 20 to 30 on a parcel. You know, looking at some of the layouts, you know, the first couple that were in here were quite large, but then you get down to, you know, one where there's only about a half dozen, you know, structures on a site. Something that like that would be more feasible, I believe, especially if you're looking to get in the downtown area, keeping it compact. But like Fred said, the main thing, you know, the city-owned properties that we have now, we really need to turn those into, you know, developments that are going to produce some income, at least tax revenue, even if we sell them off. Where typically I'm imagining a historic village is probably going to be like a 501c3 where there's going to be no taxes. So.
Well, the historic village will produce money. This is, again, this is not like a museum. I always bring up the Sanibel example because most of us will know that. So this is not by any means a non-profit museum organization or anything like that. As we said, there will be investors, probably a group of investors, who will end up purchasing land, like city land or private land. You're very right that the number of structures to be combined in that historic village is still open at this point. And if the result of that feasibility study will be to only have 10, 15 combined with other commercial segments or parts, then that might be the best option. But as I said, it's going to be a commercial project with significant income because of the tenants, because of the investors. There will be probably anchor tenants. I'm talking about things like Starbucks, interesting banks, maybe realtor companies, local companies. So it's definitely a commercial tax income tool.
Okay. And so I saw in here the quote was 200,000 for the scope of work, but if you said you could minimize the scope of work to get that price down, what kind of number are we looking for?
We believe so. Over the course of the years, the Historic Preservation Board has tried to come up with a scope of services, and this is also in the documentation, based on other examples, based on historic village concepts like this that have been built in many states. And there have been some conversations with other firms as well, so this is how we came up with this number. However, since several months we are together working on reducing the scope of services and coming down with that number. We believe we can probably come down by 20, 30, 40,000, maybe 150,000 or so, but that also depends on what the grant committee can achieve in terms of grants, federal grants, that support that as well, one way or the other. But we are still getting to that.
Okay.
And again, please, if I may add that again, in the end, this will be again the reimbursement basis. So whatever it will cost will be part of the feasibility study. So the group of investors, or maybe it's just 3 or 4 investors, they will reimburse that to whoever paid that amount or whoever brought that in.
Okay, thank you. Mike, you're good. Peter?
I'm generally in favor of thinking about it. I'm not too clear on what the anticipated next step is, and also specifically what you're asking from the city in terms of funding. I think I heard something in the presentation about it would be the normal budget money that's in, what is that?
40. So right now,
Yeah.
you allow funds for the historic preservation education.
Right.
I believe that's $10,000, and then you also are funding the I think it was the grant program, and I think that's 40,000, right? So what we'd like to do is maybe take some of those funds for this fiscal next year and apply for a matching grant. So if we can get the feasibility study complete with the funds from that and a matching grant,
Right.
that's where we would like to apply for a feasibility study. Now,
Okay.
of course, Jay has explained this. The study is going to tell us a lot. It's
Right.
going to tell us, does it warrant it downtown? How many buildings, how many structures? There's a lot going to be placed in that feasibility structure or feasibility study that will tell us exactly where the property should be, how big the property should be, how many structures should be on it. It's a study, so hopefully we can get direction from a consultant to tell us.
Okay.
Pete, you're good?
Yeah, for now.
Okay, Greg?
I like the idea. I'd like us to move forward, and I guess the question is kind of like what Pete said was, okay, how much are we looking for? What's the odds on this grant, Dallas? I mean, if we, budget this year, we've got 40,000, and we budget another 40 next year, or roll it over, so you may have in the neighborhood of 80,000. Is that going to be enough? And here's the but. What if we don't get it? What if we don't get the grant?
We have, you guys have approved a grant committee of 3 individuals on our board. They are looking into grants, and one of them is very good at finding grants. Ellie is not here today. She's obviously has a full-time position, so she can't be here. But I believe that we can get a matching grant.
Okay.
Pretty simple. That's our thought process right now. We thought we had one, and it kind of fell through. It wasn't going to work out. But I think that
To clarify, I believe what the committee is looking for is they would come back to you during the budget process and identify what they would be asking.
Okay.
Number one, for the
Yeah.
grants that they provide to the existing designated historic structures, the education program, and then they would be looking at what possibility for a matching grant dollars. It would have to be spent in the next fiscal year, so they would need to spend the time researching the grants and applying. Of course, any grant they were to apply for would have to come back to the city for approval before the application moved
Okay.
forward.
Well, that makes sense to me.
Yeah. I guess the other thing would be probably for Carl or Arlene. What about any type of impact fees or anything like that if we create this village? Would there be any like CBG grant monies that we could go towards this? Or Nicole may be able to answer it.
I don't
Study.
believe CDBG funds because it has to impact a low or moderate income neighborhood. And what I believe the difference in this is, and correct me, Jay, if I'm wrong, is that this is to eventually be income producing property.
Okay.
The goal is not to be a museum. It would be adaptive reuse of historic structures. And so I think the intent of the feasibility study is to take an inventory of potential historic structures, whether that be 2, 5, the number, whatever it is, look at potential properties, not limiting the study to city-owned properties. There might be a potential for privately owned properties, which would take several next steps. And they would look at the feasibility of what does it make sense to relocate those? What are the conditions of those potential structures we're talking about? And then where would they fit? That then would be programmed into some sort of, whether it be investor or private investor or purchase, that include for-profit businesses and or mixed use with condos or residential on the second floor of these properties. And I think the concept is mixing the historic property with a potential new structure attached to it. That's the concept of the village, which is different than a museum, which is solely the existing historic structure, and you wouldn't be attaching and mixing uses.
Gotcha. Okay. That's
Great,
it, sir.
great, thank you. Amy?
I have a lot of questions because I think this is an outline and no more than that. I think we talked about at the last council meeting that we wanted to have a presentation about the downtown area in regard to what applications are pending or where we're going in regard to delivering on a development down there. And I think that this proposal needs to be integrated with that. And I also think it needs to be integrated with the Wonder Gardens and Shangri-La because it's all together. And I am reluctant to commit to dedicating any city-owned property at this time along in that area. But the concept intuitively tells me that it would have to be in the downtown area because it just wouldn't work. As long as there was an opportunity, and I'm familiar with some of these projects, like in Hartford and in Connecticut and also out in New York. One is a museum. The one in Hartford integrates historic buildings, but basically you have the facade and then they build all around it. So that's how, and then it becomes an income-producing things. I don't quite understand where you're talking about with the investor. If you have a historic building, is that still maintained as a historic building, or is that totally integrated within the commercial property that's being proposed there?
Well, the historic buildings will remain historic.
So that part would be nonprofit, but you would
It's-
have a commercial entity that's associated with it.
It would be, in most of these cases, like in the past, it would be a commercial entity who would own this whole project, probably. I mean, again, we are not the party who would suggest all the viable options at the end, but one of the approaches is that there's one entity, most likely with the city as being part of future directions too, who own the whole village. So yes, the historic structures will remain historic. The reason for the structure mix is, like you just mentioned that other example, some important tenants to bring in the money that we need on the long-term range need more space that a little cottage might not be able to accommodate. So that's why you add contemporary parts to it, but the historic part of each single structure will always stand out. It will always be the most prominent aspect of each
But that would be a focus on the facade or the inside of the building?
Ideally, both.
Both.
Ideally, both. So we don't.
So you would have, I'm not, an expert in evaluation, so you would have half a property that had a commercial valuation and half a property that was non-profit valuation, which to the city.
Just to clarify, you could have a for-profit business in a historic structure. So they could be a tenant, a restaurant, utilizing that historic structure. The difference would be is if it was a designated property, we would have a certificate of appropriateness process. We would have a review process
there'd be
over
restrictions on the
changes,
development.
just like, yes.
The design.
The
of the
design, so that it was keeping the integrity of the historic structure. But you could have private ownership of the historic structure as well as occupancy by commercial uses as well, or a mix of residential
Right.
and commercial uses. I would not limit it to just a nonprofit utilizing the structure. Where we would have some regulatory comments on would be any changes to the exterior that would affect the historic designation of the property under the Division of Historical Resources process.
And what would be the city's role? I don't understand that.
I think that's left to be determined by the consultant, whether this be privately owned, property, privately owned, but I think the overseeing of where the project would go and the direction would be part of the city council and the historic board's direction, and the beginning of the feasibility study would be the city's direction as well.
So let's talk about the Dixie Moon for a second. The Dixie Moon was a historic designated property. Thank you all for being on board to move that structure. And we just put into the ordinance the demo delay. So let's say somebody is on that list and they want to demo that building. This gives us a chance to move that, if they don't want it, to move that to a village and have it be mixed use, whether it is, a veterinary or a doctor's office, whatever, and make it a profitable business. So they would pay tax on it just like any other business in downtown. If it is designated historic, then that is where the city comes into place and the board comes into place if they want to change anything on it. So the Dixie Moon would be a good example of it going into the village and having someone take that over and make it a business. That's kind of what we're looking.
I understand that intent, but that's a good example because it took us months to find a spot for that.
Right.
And it wasn't because there wasn't city property available. It's that we couldn't find the right spot. We also have some idea of what a renovation cost on that was. We didn't even put any facilities in there because it was $300,000-$400,000 to make it functional. So I guess maybe these are all the questions that would be answered by a feasibility study. But and if you think that even when you looked at the material, you definitely have to have to get these grants. You don't get them for free. There's always a matching aspect to it. So the city would be involved with at least 50% of that. So I think it's important that if you want to go through with this, that you get that cost down. I always like to have a lot more information, so I'm not against getting a study, but I think there's a lot of serious questions that the city has to focus on and that the Historic Preservation Board has to focus on, because I do think we owe it to the taxpayers to be certain that that project of $20 million that we did isn't just pretty to look at, We need development down there. And I know things are coming that we need to integrate this whole thing. We can't just do in isolation, have the historic village concept be brought before the council without our really understanding feasibility all along Old 41. So I think that project that workshop that we had suggested to the council should go forward in integration with this. But that's just a caution that I feel about this presentation.
Well, and the board feels like this is just one aspect of bringing people downtown. There can be, obviously the Wonder Gardens is another aspect, and hopefully the Shangri-Las as well. So we want to bring people downtown, and hopefully this is one way that we
definitely
can
need
do it.
commercial development down there.
Mhm.
And again, I'm familiar with these kinds of things that happen in New York and Connecticut, so I'm not against it, and it does bring a draw. But whether it brings the value per acre higher or lower, I don't know. I'm not a development person, but I think that's what we have to look at. On Old 41, we have higher density down there, and there's a reason why we're doing that, not only to just bring the people there. We want to have a higher value per acre for whatever development goes down there. So if we have isolated houses, I don't think we're going to get a higher value per acre. So just talking about a business decision there.
Maybe I can make one remark to address that. In my opinion, in my experience of the last over 20 years, whenever I was involved in these kind of projects, both nationally and internationally, the result was that the value of the land right where a historic village is and in the broader area always went up, because the historic structures increase the attractiveness of these areas if it's done right. A little museum somewhere isolated doesn't do that, and that's not what you're talking about. But the concept we as the board have in mind, in our opinion, will definitely increase the value. So this was a very interesting point, what you just brought up.
I think we need to explore that, not to be skeptical.
Exactly,
But
yes.
I do think that needs to be explored, because that's where I would like to focus on, and also expediting the other development that's down there once our project is done in fall. That should be a new priority for the council.
Right.
Thank you for the presentation.
Great, thank you. Council, anything else?
I'd make a motion.
Hang on just a second, Pete. Arlene? No, go ahead.
I think the board would be looking for some direction from the council, should they consider pursuing these concepts, and continually bring them back to you all for review and approval.
Okay. Pete, I'm sorry. Yeah, no, go ahead.
No, I'd just like to make a motion to approve essentially what Arlene laid out before. It's not, these are steps forward, playing into next year's budget.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Motion and a second. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mayor Simmons.
Aye.
Councilman O'Flynn.
Aye.
Councilman Gibson.
Aye.
Councilman Forbes.
Aye.
Councilwoman Carumba.
Aye.
Councilman DeWitt.
Aye.
Great. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Fred?
Thank you for your time.
I think there's two things that ought to be high up on the priority list, and then the third one is a thought. But number one, there's two ways you can go on these things. You can do a thing where you have the old buildings, and then you have other new buildings tied to them and all that, or you can keep it strictly primarily the old buildings. If you want a Starbucks, it's a separate little building, but the shops and all that are geared to the antiquity of the buildings. And those are successful, and they wouldn't, I don't think they would take near as much ground. And I think we ought to be looking at that as well as this other concept. And the other thing that I think is that when you do surveying of these historical structures, don't limit yourself to Bonita. I mean, look up in Estero, and because there's old buildings around the area that may not be in Bonita, but they might even be more historically significant, some of the buildings that we would have here. That's it. I think we're on the right track. Thank you.
Great. Thanks. Guys, anything to add?
We had talked about bringing in other structures throughout Collier, Lee, and Henry, and Glades, and all of them. So, yeah, we're on board with that as well.
Very good point, yeah.
Great. Wonderful. Good job, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to item G, presentation to City Council regarding the Bonita Beach Road corridor and direction to staff regarding the implementation of potential amendments to the City of Bonita Springs Land Development Code, Green Sheet 17-05-0191. Good morning, Arlene.
Good morning. Arlene Hunter, Assistant City Manager. This morning, I'd like to introduce Alexis Crespo with Waldrop Engineering, representing staff. We are looking, and I wanted to make this clear, this is not a permission to advertise. This is an introduction of the concepts that staff would like to move forward in integrating your 2014 Complete Streets Resolution, the Bonita Beach Road Visioning, the Quadrant Plan, the newly adopted Bonita Beach Road Comprehensive Plan amendments, our multimodal vision, safe and effective evacuation routes, and the sense of place that Council's been discussing through the Bonita Beach Road visioning process. There are some concepts we will be looking at that are Bonita Beach Road specific, but also some that are important for multimodal and connectivity citywide. This is just an introduction of those concepts. We expect to continue conversations with private property owners, developers, businesses as well through the entire process. And at a later date, we'll be coming with you with a more specific permission to advertise, but we'd like some general direction from council at this time on these concepts to move forward with the research that needs to continue. And with that, I'll introduce Alexis Crespo.
Okay. Good morning, Alexis.
Good morning. Alexis Crespo with Waldrop. I have a brief presentation kind of to walk you through those items that Arlene just outlined. And just to reiterate again, this is step 1A of a much longer process ahead of you in terms of implementing all the long-range planning you've been working on over the past several years. So just touching on the framework you have in place on some of those various studies and plans, talk about the areas of the land development code that need to be re-examined in order to implement those visions and long-range policy, and then talk about what we see as the next steps and timeline in the process. So we all know how important Bonita Beach Road is to the community. It's the first impression, and your comp plan really calls it out as the beautiful gateway to the city. And we do see opportunities through the various studies you've done to increase connectivity, implement more of a multimodal approach, not to negate the importance of vehicle traffic on the roadway, but to bring in the bike ped elements that are not there in certain locations. And also just the opportunity to really make this a great part of the community's identity and contribute to the sense of place. A quote from the tool study that I think encapsulates that idea is, we want Bonita Springs to be a place, not somewhere where people just drive through. And so it's important, again, it's not about simply making this a pedestrian corridor. It's about bringing those elements into place with what is right now a very auto-oriented corridor from an infrastructure standpoint as well as a land use and design standpoint. So you've been hard at work for many years on looking at Bonita Beach Road, and rightfully you've worked on data and analysis, you've completed various studies, and you've just at your last meeting implemented some broad long-range policies relating to the corridor. In terms of actual implementing regulation, you've only done a few things relating to Bonita Beach Road, and that is adopting a Complete Streets Resolution 2014. This was never integrated into your land development code, but really set forth a lot of great specifics on how to improve roadway design within the city. You've looked to some extent at uses along the corridor. It's not a distinctive corridor overlay in Chapter 4, but there are areas throughout Chapter 4 that speak to special exceptions needed for certain uses, but certainly there's a lot of gaps in how uses are treated along the roadway. And from an aesthetic standpoint, you have touched on signage along the corridor. I believe within the last year or two adopted Bonita Beach Road specific signage standards. So just to kind of summarize, there's areas in Chapter 4 that we need to look at, and we've been working with the city for many years now, and we know that to be successful, we've got to take this incrementally and in phases. I say that as much to council as the stakeholders here today, that we're not trying to create a sweeping ordinance that tries to implement 5 studies along the corridor, but rather take this in bite-sized segments that is readily understandable to council, to the stakeholders, and the community who've been participating in this effort. And some of the areas we'd look at breaking apart and taking on would be your roadway infrastructure, where there are not sidewalk requirements currently in your code. There's no regulations regarding bike lanes, both within public roads as well as within private communities. You've got very soft language regarding interconnectivity, so we'd look at ways we could work on strengthening some of those provisions. Your street cross sections were inherited from Lee County, as much of your code still is Lee County code from over 10 years ago. They've gone ahead and updated their cross-sections based upon complete streets, and we would recommend that council provide direction to make those similar updates, and also look at information we've received from FDOT on how to improve upon some of those cross-sections. Looking at landscaping design standards, the code really speaks to a suburban type of development format along the roadway, and how can we integrate a menu approach. We like the flexibility in your code that we've implemented on Big Box, on New 41, so that we're not saying the building must be located here on every site. We would not seek to do that through this amendment process, but rather provide flexibility to create the vision on an individual property basis based upon the developer's design for that property. So opportunities we'd look at, again, incrementally through the process, is look at additional standards for complete streets. The tool study broke out the roadway, as it is several miles in length, into different context zones. So we'd recommend, as we work through this process, that we treat the I-75 interchange differently from a usage, design, connectivity, bike ped standpoint than we would the beach portion of the roadway, because it's going to be different in how that's going to be used by your vehicles, bicycles, and pedestrians. So there's the opportunity to look at that in different segments. Also look to land uses as it relates very closely to the transportation infrastructure. And then additional design standards. There's always been a strong message from council that we need to continue to look at aesthetics and build upon that for the gateway to the city. So with that, we've just wanted to be very high level today. We wanted to get your input, permission to proceed in beginning the process. Then we'd look to draft amendments in close concert with your stakeholders. We could map out how we would get the public involvement built into the process so that we come to you with some level of consensus when these amendments are ultimately drafted. And then we would go through the appropriate public hearing processes with your LPA and through council. So a long road ahead, but we believe it is time to get started based upon all the good work you guys have done with your various studies and comp planning.
Right. Thank you, Alexis.
Thank you.
I had a question regarding the connectivity.
Yes.
What you had said that's important but not required, or I don't know how how it was listed there, but can you walk through that a little bit?
I don't have the exact LDC section, but interconnectivity, it's stated in both, I believe, the code as well as the comp plan that it is encouraged but not required. And so when, and staff can certainly speak to this, when people come in and they want their own curb cut onto Bonita Beach Road, staff has difficulty requesting that two neighbors work together to create cross-access. So oftentimes one person's coming in before the other, and it can be difficult to require those types of connections.
Okay, I understand that. So connectivity in a broad sense, but not in a, well, no, in a general sense, but, well, however you want to say it.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, you know what we're trying to do, make for walkers and pedestrians and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I just didn't want that statement to somehow get in the way.
Yes, and I'll just say that it's understood that not every site can interconnect. There's going to be uses that don't want to interconnect because they're not necessarily compatible uses where you'd really walk to the other. So there, again, flexibility needs to be built into this, but we want to just strengthen the language so that there is the tools in place to create maybe instead of a vehicle connection, at least a pedestrian connection to neighboring properties.
Okay. I think I'll start down here. Amy, do you?
Yeah, I'll follow up on the connectivity, because when I think of connectivity, I think of like neighborhood connectivity, and I'm not sure that we are requiring that from one residential entity to another with our thing. So I'd like to work on that.
Okay.
I also have some concerns about integration with existing development, and we just went through that in our zoning that we had on Monday, is that, and I understand that you want to build in flexibility, but when we at council and in zoning are considering these applications, we consider them in isolation, and as we're trying to be flexible, which I think we should because we are encouraging development and the right kind of development in Bonita Springs, I'm concerned that as we do that after we do a few of these, our vision is going to be lost. And I think that's one reason why we're trying to get a conceptual idea of what these different zones are. And I don't know how you can integrate that with the work that you're doing. You know, we want to trade off some, but we don't want to trade off too much. Because again, we don't want to have this vision lost, because we like the vision, and even the community has emphasized that they want to continue that vision. So how we can integrate that with the work that you're doing, I'm not certain, but that's a concern that I have there. And I'm on board with everything you say, because I think now that we have adopted these visions, we need to implement it. The next step is necessary.
Thank you.
Grammy, Greg?
Yeah, I just kind of pile on what Amy says. Whenever we do this and whenever we move forward with it, I really want to encourage whoever's conducting these, whether it's John or whether it's Walter Engineering, whoever's going to conduct these studies, make sure we reach out to the businesses. Because I don't want to be back here in a year from now, like a Tennessee Street. Hey, we're not happy with this. We don't like this. We weren't informed of it, but we need to make sure that we reach out to them so everybody's on board and we hear what they're saying loud and clear, instead of after 90% of it's done and like, whoa, we didn't know this was the last 10% that you guys were going to do. So that's my only thing. I think it's great to go forward with what we're doing and keeping the vision going straight.
Great. Thanks, Greg. Peter?
No, I'm good.
Okay, Mike?
Yeah, no, I'm good. We just need to get everything integrated so we can get our vision going. There was a comment brought up earlier about a moratorium or exempting a property from a moratorium. I didn't think we had any moratorium on this.
There is a moratorium that's being discussed on Bonita Beach Road Vision, and it would be the property within that location as well as the quadrant. The public hearings are June 7th and June 21st. It did go to the LPA on May 11th.
Okay, so that's not being affected today. That's coming before us later.
Yes, sir.
That is not related to this item. This is just an introduction of these concepts to begin review for LDC amendment.
Fred?
On this connectivity, I think it's critically important on Beach Road that as much of these commercial properties do have connectivity for vehicles, because that keeps vehicles off Beach Road getting to the next one. And I think we should, short of putting a gun to somebody's head, we should go right up to it's got to happen, except in some rare special parcels where it just can't work, and they're kind of isolated islands with nothing on either side, and it's already developed, so to speak, so you couldn't buy anything with it anyway. But I think we got to do that if we want to help reduce the load on good old Bonita Beach Road.
Right. I think they're going ahead and doing that, because what Sardinia Lane or whatever right there at the Home Depot, they've already started it. So I think they're doing their job at it.
Yeah, I'd just like to see a little more oomph in the language to move everybody in that direction.
You said sardines?
Sardinia Lane.
Yeah.
Is that real?
Alexis, to Councilman Forbes's thought there, your thoughts?
I think we need to go back through the language, see how it's written today, and then work through the public workshops to see, get the input from the development community, because they certainly have a lot of good input on items like that, because they see the nuts and bolts of it. But certainly, I would say between commercial properties to commercial retail properties, there should be very strong language on connecting those. And I don't know that that's ever an issue. Sometimes it's an issue when you have a private gated existing community that doesn't want to connect to the intensive commercial next door. They say thanks, but no thanks. So we want to create those opportunities, but yes, be strong when it comes to keeping vehicle trips off the roadway when they could easily be using frontage roads and cross access.
Okay. Great, thanks. Anything else, Greg?
Just with saying that, Alexa, just a question. If we do create those frontage roads, can that reduce their per trips and on Beach Road? Can we reduce something like that, John? I guess that's a John question.
Come on up,
The
Mr.
answer is
Dolmer.
no, but
You've been pretty
Okay.
quiet this morning.
I haven't heard from you in a couple days. So.
Good morning. The answer is it does not change the traffic impact, but it does change the traffic flow. So certain intersections.
So there's no credit they could get by. hey,
It's
if you
not,
connect here, we'll give you a little bit of credit on that because you're going to go up to a major intersection rather than a curb cut.
it basically allows greater capacity at a larger intersection than you would at a smaller intersection.
Okay.
Is the short answer.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Council, anything else? Arlene?
So we would be looking for direction from council to move forward in this process.
So moved.
Okay. There's been a motion and a second. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilman O'Flynn.
Aye.
Councilman Gibson.
Aye.
Councilman Forbes.
Aye.
Councilwoman Carumba.
Aye.
Councilman DeWitt.
Aye.
Mayor Simmons.
Aye. Okay, moving on to the consent agenda. I would like to pull G,
I'd like to pull E, please.
E. Anything else?
Move the rest.
Okay, motion to approve the rest. I'll second that. Okay, there's been a motion and a second. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilman Gibson.
Aye.
Councilman Forbes.
Aye.
Councilwoman Carumba. Aye. Councilman DeWitt.
Aye.
Mayor Simmons.
Aye.
Councilman O'Flynn.
Aye.
Okay, great. Peter, E.
Yeah, my question, I guess, for Arlene or Jay here about E is, I thought normally we have at least some rudimentary rendering of what the project would look like. And maybe I'm missing it, but I don't see it here.
Sam has been working directly with the property owner, and I think they're still working through. So what is before you is conceptual approval of the grant. He still has to move through the review process with Sam. I know that there's a timing issue with, we were working with this property owner because there was some infrastructure that had to be relocated on this actual property because of the sidewalk being there. But he has to meet all the requirements of the architectural review, but we can definitely get more design elements to you as well.
Well, I just thought as a matter of process, we do that, because, I mean, I think literally what's being approved here is install two new windows and an entry door. Whereas, I may be mistaken, but I thought what we saw in the past is, here's an idea of what it's gonna look like. Now it looks like we're just being asked to approve it, and, I mean, Sam's a great architect, that's not the issue, but we're kind of delegating it out. So is that a change in the process, or what? I mean, why can't there be a rough sketch of what this would look like, so we have an idea, kind of?
We can absolutely provide that. I will talk with Jay and Sam, and if
Yeah.
the council would like to wait till the next meeting till we bring that back, I'm
I would
perfectly
just
fine with that.
prefer that, consistent with what we've done in the past. That's,
Okay.
And I think
Mike, yeah.
actually, as far as a sketch, I think you can actually just drive by it. I believe it's already done.
Oh.
The double doors and the windows are already in there, and they've restuccoed
He's
the outside of the door.
continuing working on the process.
Details, details. Chicken, egg. Yeah, court.
No, I'm in
cart,
favor of
horse.
waiting to, if they want to take a picture of this, but I think from a process point of view, that Councilman O'Flynn brought up a good point, that in the future, we should have something a little more than just words when we are asked to approve these things. So, and if it's already done, it doesn't matter if we can wait until the next one,
Better
but
than
that's
it did.
really bizarre.
So they can, under the grant program, apply, there's two ways they can apply, is one, they can apply for conceptual approval for the grant funds with the design. They can also retroactively apply. We don't have a limit of when they apply for that. They can come forward and say, this is the work I've done, and if you find it approvable, if you find that it meets the intent of Old Florida style, the council could also approve that as well.
so I'd make a motion, bring it back at the next meeting.
Okay, it's been a
Second.
motion and a second. Amy Crumba for a second. Okay, further discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilman Forbes.
Aye.
Councilwoman Carumba.
Aye.
Councilman DeWitt.
Aye.
Mayor Simmons.
Aye.
Councilman O'Flynn.
Aye.
Councilman Gibson.
Aye.
Okay, I pulled G. Nicole wanted to come up with some updated information. Nicole?
Yes, Nicole Perino, Parks and Recreation Director, and thank you again for pulling that. I have some good news on this one in that I met with the YMCA Director, Pete Shattuck, and they have agreed to lower the price. They're actually going to go to $4 a visit and $12 for families. So as it currently is, at 5 and 15, it will lower to 4 and 12. So I just wanted to let all of you know that before, if you decide to approve this.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any questions?
Motion to approve.
Okay, it's been a motion to approve.
Second.
And a second. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilwoman Carumba?
Aye.
Councilman DeWitt?
Aye.
Mayor Simmons?
Aye.
Councilman O'Flynn?
Aye.
Councilman Gibson?
Aye.
Councilman Forbes?
Aye.
Okay, we're going to move on to item 8, public hearing. Public hearing to adopt an ordinance to amend the Bonita Springs Comprehensive Plan for CSX Seminole Gulf Rail Corridor. Public comment is allowed.
I apologize.
No worries.
First of all, this is an item that's going to be continued, but I'd like to read the title block into the record. We're on the railroad, right? Okay. This is with CSX Seminole, this is an item that will be continued to a time and date certain, but because it was continued to time and date certain, I have to start the hearing at this point. I'm going to read the title block into the record. This is an ordinance of the City of Bonita Springs, Florida, amending the City of Bonita Springs Comprehensive Plan as adopted by ordinance number 02-16 as amended, so as to update certain elements to encourage multiple uses of the railroad corridor, adding objectives and policies to the future land use element, transportation element, and recreation open space element, adding the CSX Seminole Gulf Rail Corridor map to the transportation element, providing a conflicts clause, a severability clause, and providing for an effective date and for other purposes. This matter was originally continued from your February 15th, 2017 meeting. I have been requested by Arlene Hunter to continue this to June 7th, which is City Council's next meeting, because of certain meetings, and I think Councilmember Flynn can probably describe more if he wishes. And then there may be some additional changes which will come under separate memorandum.
I can add something if you'd like.
Sure.
Which is, remember, one of the things we're working on is the possibility of the Sun Trail bike path there. And when we looked at this, whether it was a month ago or two, there was a notion in here of no rail banking, and the city would always oppose abandonment. And the questions I raised were considering how rails to trails, or even rails with trails, have been done in other parts of the state. I was a little concerned that we at least investigate whether that language would cramp our style rather than kind of keep the playing field ahead of us in terms of what we might want to do. So there's been a meeting arranged by, Arlene's going to attend, and myself, Margaret Banyan, who's working with us on this, along with Bill Spikowski, who is, I'm sure you know, the fellow who originally did the MPO work 3 years ago from where this came. Along with, I guess, Margaret's found a rail trail attorney expert tomorrow at 11 o'clock before the Florida Greenways and Trails Foundation Board. So coming out of that, we would have perhaps some suggested changes to this.
Okay.
Maybe, maybe not.
That's good. Great.
Is that fair, Arlene?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Council?
Move to continue.
Move to continue,
Second.
and a second. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilman DeWitt?
Aye.
Mayor Simmons?
Aye.
Councilman O'Flynn?
Aye.
Councilman Gibson?
Aye.
Councilman Forbes?
Aye.
It's being continued, but you
It's
could-
being continued, but absolutely we'll have some public comment. We'll take the vote, and then we'll allow public comment.
Councilman Forbes?
Aye.
Councilwoman Carumba?
Aye.
Great, public comment. Members of the public that'd like to speak at this time, please come forward. Hello, Martha, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Mayor and Council. Great to see you this morning. Watching you on Channel 98, Comcast TV, and spoke to our former Councilman Alex Grant. Nice to see Councilman Ferrera here, too. When we were on council, we adopted passenger rail resolution because that's so important to the future, as it was to the past, transportation element. I see a contradiction between policy 1.6.6 and policy 1.6.7. You're looking at, and I owe the education from former Councilman Grant on this, is you talked in this policy about freight rail. You can't have freight rail and light rail together.
Right.
Light rail gauge isn't capable of carrying freight rail.
Right.
So you can kind of maybe fix that discrepancy there. The other thing is I see you have land banking in here for potential depots. I think like a real, you don't own it, but you could, since you're owning everything else in town these days, is, which is great, you know, is I would call it Grant Central Station, by the way. Yes, because Alex is a great proponent of rail and he's done a lot for us. Is the old Causeway lumber site would be an awesome depot. You know, if that dog track ever gets redeveloped, either by them or by somebody else who knows what their future leads to, thanks to the state legislature this year, that would be a central location to have auto train. I know Alex has spoken to Amtrak for years about that, has lobbied them, has sent postcards. We've all sent stuff to them, talked to them personally, talked to the CEO personally. And, you know, the MPO and the state are interested in renewing rail around the state. One of the most energy efficient, not road-based, and that's one of the things that we're trying to look at as being multimodal in this, transportation solutions, extremely energy efficient. You know, you can take like a diesel engine from Arcadia down to here like on a gallon or something. I mean, it's like crazy. That's amazing. You can't even get your car that far. So I want you to consider maybe adding potential future depots in this. I understand that there's always a concern about noise and lights and all that kind of stuff with whatever transportation solutions you have, you know. An overpass was a big deal. By the way, thank you for your last vote. That was many years in coming. But passenger rail would be such an explosive, wonderful thing to our area. I see no contradiction in having people riding their bicycles to the train station. There's, you know, trail's great, but please don't abandon the track, and please don't, you know, rule out having passenger rail here. Thank you. Freight's important too, because we have industrial. Thanks.
Thanks, Martha.
Thanks for everything.
Other members of the public? Councilman Ferrara, good morning.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I want to ditto what Martha has just said in many capacities, especially the multimodal, integrating our plan with the county and the state. Just let me give you an aside about how poor our transportation system is in Florida, and I'm talking about in the total area of Florida. Some years ago, Mayor Aaron and I had to go to a conference in Jacksonville. And rather than drive hours and hours on the road, we decided to fly. So we went to RSW and we got a flight. We landed in Atlanta, out of the state of Florida. Okay. Spent 2.5 hours there and then flew back to Jacksonville. Doesn't make sense. Okay. We're the 4th largest state in the country and growing exponentially. So we need our transportation system to grow with it. I want to commend Councilman Forbes and you, Mr. Mayor, for pushing this amendment, the rail, which in some cases, in some groups, are against rail. They're for gas tax. They're looking at expanding highways because of the gas tax. Also, I'd like to talk about Strike Lane and its interconnectivity with Estero. That's an important aspect of this project. So thanks, Peter, for bringing up, following through with this and further study, because it does require further study. But bikes, walk paths, tourism, pollution, all those issues are important to us. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Great. Thank you, Councilman Farrar. Thanks for being here. Good to see you. Other members of the public? Good morning.
Morning, I'm Richard Polina. I live in Bonita Springs on Ragsdale Street, and I'm in favor of the passenger rail here. In keeping with the prior comments by the historic village, if that becomes into fruition, rail service to that location, which is probably in the downtown area. The infrastructure is there. We have a good park set up. The people would come from other areas to see the historic village concept here, and I'm in favor of passenger rail. In keeping with the comment by Martha about the gauge of the rail, if it was gauged for freight, it'll handle passenger. If it's gauged for passenger, it won't handle freight. So the rail service by CSX is improved all the way down to Aligo Road because of the propane that's delivered up there. It would only have to be improved down to here to incorporate freight and passenger. Thank you.
Great, thank you, sir. Councilman Grant, good morning.
Yes, Alex Grant. I only have 4 minutes, not 4 hours, to talk about passenger rail service. But passenger rail service is extremely important for your redevelopment. You spent $19 million on Old 41. If you want to make Old 41 a success, you really need to bring people down here to and from areas like Orlando to here. And what better way to do that is by long-distance passenger rail service. You could have an extension of auto train from Sanford, Florida to Bonita Springs without any great difficulty. You could bring in 400 people a day, 200 people a day coming northbound, southbound by the year 2020 with the population that we have right now. Those are people, paying people, passengers with some money that would be spending money on Old 41 businesses down here. So that's something to really consider. That's why passenger rail service is so important. Not only commuter rail service, but also long-distance Amtrak passengers rail service. So please keep that in mind. You have plenty of room. You have, I think, 120 foot of right-of-way. There's no problem with having rails and trails together, coexisting. All you need to do is put a fence between the rail track and the bike track, and you're in business. Pretty simple. And very economical. Great for all sides. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Alex. And I just want to take a moment here to recognize we have 3 members here formerly of the City Council: Councilwoman Martha Simons, Councilman Alex Grant that just spoke, and Councilman Richard Ferrara. And we also have Laura Carr here and Rick Steinmeier, who are candidates in District 4. So thank you for your, or 3, excuse me. Same thing.
Same thing. One of them.
That's right, 3. You think I would know 4. That's right. Absolutely. But I just want to welcome everybody here today. Thank you for your input, participation, and leadership. So thank you. Okay. Let's see. Where are we?
We have to.
Yes.
No, we did vote.
We did vote, so we're good now? Okay, fantastic. We're going to move on to mayor and council member items. Item A, discuss various topics about which to speak to County Commissioner Larry Kiker when he visits City Hall on May 24th. Councilwoman Amy Carumba.
Yeah, I spoke with Audrey and I said, can I talk to my other council people about this? And they said no, that I had to do a publicly for sunshine laws, because I know that a number of the council people have interacted, and the staff directly with Lee County officials, and I really haven't done it myself. So I do have a private meeting scheduled with him, and I just would like some guidance, what we think is the most important. I would reinforce any efforts that have been done in the past and that's why I brought it forth. So, and then the staff brought up this list of 16 items. I'm not going to talk to him about 16 items. I just would like to talk to him about 2 or 3 of them. I don't know if we want to talk about no dogs on Bonita Beach Road, which was brought up in the Bonita Beach Park. But I'd like some input. That's the bottom line.
No, Amy, one thing that I
Yeah,
could
yeah.
certainly have you talk with him about, which would be great, is the meeting that we attended down there at Lover's Key about the bridge. You know,
Yes. I have that on my list.
Great,
But
okay.
I would reinforce it, but if others, I think that one of the things I'd like to speak with him about is the coordination of activities that happens. We also had just a discussion about Fort Myers Beach putting in a bike pedestrian path that's going to stop at the bridge that we're talking about. And my question was, how does that integrate with our plans for our own bike and pedestrian path along Hickory Boulevard, but also how that bridge would impact those. So decisions are made outside of our control that we hear about, but we're not, I don't feel we're totally, I know the local planning agencies are supposed to be integrating all these interests from various entities, but I'm going to talk to him about that. So I'm good with that. And
yeah, and you know, and I don't know, not that I want to interject too much opinion here, because I really don't, but I think, you know, for the folks that weren't at that meeting or not really aware of that situation, if you're at the north end of Lover's Key in Bonita Springs and you want to cross over into Fort Myers Beach, there's an existing bridge there, a drawbridge that exists, and looking about 50 years old. Is that right, Matt? In that range. So I guess there, you know, I don't know that per se there are safety issues, but when you have a 50-year-old bridge, I guess it's time to look at what's going on there and replace the bridge. So not so much, I don't think the issue is bridge replacement, but what do you replace it with?
Right, the
Do you
design.
replace it with a drawbridge? Do you replace it with a skyscraper, a causeway, if you will? Or what do you do down there? And obviously, there are concerns down there and questions to be answered. So that's just kind of a rough sketch. So I don't want to handicap it one way or another, but that certainly would be. And Amy, you were looking for another, you know, where we have the county road, Bonita Beach Road, specifically east of 75. You know, I know there's some lighting, and Fred, we've kind of all heard about this, but some lighting concerns, and, you know, it's county road and then it's private road. How do we deal with street lighting kind of down on that end of town, I think would be.
See, my feeling is we've already made the pitch for help financially for some of these things. I'm not sure that would, if you think we should want to reinforce that pitch to have them help us with these very important projects that we're doing, and that's my question to the council. If you think that would be worth reinforcing, I'd be willing. I mean, I'm in favor of that. But the other thing is like this purchase of Edison 2020 project. I mean, we're very much into that. It looks like there's an interest at Lee County to do that. But there are other projects that we have talked about that we could use that are not even on the drawing board to sort of integrate with that so we could complete the picture with Bonita Springs. So that's something I would want to talk about if that's okay with the council. But I would like 2 or is anybody else meeting with him privately?
I'm not going to be here. Kathy and I are going to be away.
Okay,
I'm not going to be here.
so am I the only one that's going to talk? So
Well,
you better, so
good.
well, it's fine. I don't mind talking, but I don't want to just be my
Yeah.
emphasis. I'd like to have guidance from the rest of the council.
Fred?
Well, I want to make sure that everybody's aware of this, the way this new pass bridge, it's a PD&E study, just like you were on the flyover. And if the consultant says the one bridge that people don't want is it, it'll be it because it's federal funded. So just be aware that that's, you know, in the story as they're looking at all the options, one of the options is to renovate the existing bridge in place, so to speak. But I know the big hot button is if you don't repair it and you build a new one, the residents prefer the one that has a drawbridge in it because it's lower to the water and doesn't create a visual impediment.
Right.
But it is a PD&E study.
Mhm.
And it's interesting because I asked for an example of the criterion that's used in those kinds of studies, not for our bridge, the
Right.
bridge that we're talking about, other ones. If you look at the criterion that they used and how, in other cases, they determined that they wanted to have a 65-foot bridge, it were things that I think will impact the decision with us. So I think if we're involved with that, we need to be aware of the direction that might likely be taken by that study. So that's why the mayor, and that's in my district, that's why I was involved, and the mayor, because he gets involved with everything.
The mayor.
But I'll be glad to talk to him about it. But so the bridge, I'm interested in, the 2020 conservation effort. Anything else? Maybe one more thing? Or those two would be fine?
I've taken up a couple of things, so I'm good. No, I'm deflecting.
What do you think about pushing for the financing? Do you think
Well,
that?
I'll chat about that for
Yeah,
a second, but
yeah.
are you through, Fred?
I think
Yeah, I thought this was very important. I mean, not that one meeting is very important,
Right.
but I actually think we should have a city council workshop about our relationship with the county and how
Right.
that works. And I'll tell you why. There are a lot of good people up there. We've
Mhm.
built very good relations. Our staff has built good relations over time. And there's another point which I'd like to talk about more fully at a workshop,
Mhm.
which is, I'm going to put this, it may sound metaphysical. Just because you're in Bonita Springs doesn't mean you've left Lee County. And the point I'm making is that when municipalities form, we're relieved of the unincorporated area tax, 0.81. But we're still part of Lee County, and Lee County is still here. Every much a bit of the governance, kind of almost as we are, they have responsibility. And they have a budget of $1 billion. Now, they have constitutional officers, a few hundred million, but they have substantial continued obligations, as they should have, in this area, notwithstanding the fact that we are an incorporated municipality. So let me give you an example. All right, and I'm not talking about our parks department, but I'll give you an example. In Estero, there's a large regional county park. It happens to be in an incorporated municipality. It predated it, but it easily could have been put in later. So Lee County still has responsibilities for parks in Lee County. It still has responsibilities, I believe, for new roads in Lee County. Not maintenance. Maintenance is in the unincorporated area tax. But, so take, for example, what we're doing on the quadrant plan. And we haven't directly talked about funding with them, because I think we ought to have a meeting about that first. But here's an example where we are adding lanes, but we're adding lanes around the back of buildings. Those lanes are in Bonita Springs. They're also in Lee County. Okay? So I'll give you an example. One of the county commissioners had a nice chat with him a few months ago, and he was talking about in North Fort Myers. He said, I see what you're doing on the quadrant plan. We're doing something up in North Fort Myers. Happens to be unincorporated Lee, just happens to be unincorporated Lee. Making connections from one road to another. All right. That is being done there. I believe it could be done by the county here. I don't think it would normally be thought of that way. But I don't, to put it in a certain way, it's not as though the county commissioners, when it comes to new road construction, are just the commissioners of unincorporated Lee. They are the commissioners of all of Lee County. So that has big implications for how we fund things in Bonita Springs. And my way of thinking of it is that it's not a partnership, it's working collaboratively with them to better enhance all of Lee County, but in our case, the area that we call Bonita Springs. It happens to be part of Lee County, it happens to be an unincorporated area too. So that has big implications for things like the Sun Trail route, which we have not talked to them about. But, so let me give you another example. The possible Sun Trail route from Beach Road to Estero is obviously in two incorporated municipalities. And you might say, well, why would Lee County be involved with that? Well, go to the Legacy Trail in Sarasota County. A huge portion of that is in the city of Venice. Who paid for that? Sarasota County. The county's financial responsibilities do not end at the municipal incorporation boundary. So it's a big topic, and I'm not saying they aren't doing things for us, but, and I'm not saying, Amy, you should be saying this to Larry,
No, I'm
you know,
just
because I
taking
think
notes.
we all have to get together and talk about this. But you know, the way I look at it is we need to better understand and have a conversation among ourselves and then have a conversation with them about how we think about these things.
Yeah, I totally agree, because I know that individual council people have occasion to interact with Lee County
Right.
officials in, you know, a peripheral way. And I think it would be good if we had sort of a concept for what, when we have the ability to say, hi, oh, by the way,
Right.
we want to have the council position advanced. That would be very helpful to me anyway. Because even though that's not something that I typically do, which is, you know, do that kind of networking, but there are occasions, more than I was aware of, where I could say a word here or there.
Right.
Speaking
Fred?
of, well, just tacking on to what Councilman O'Flynn eloquently laid out, yeah, we are part of Lee County. We elect those county commissioners, just like the unincorporated people vote on them. And we all pay taxes to Lee County.
6 times more
Big.
than we pay to Bonita Springs.
Yeah, a lot more. At least so. I didn't get a discount.
Right.
Because I'm in the city.
Right.
I
Right.
think we need to have that workshop soon and then go forth with a united front on that.
I think that's good, and I think we need to lay out our priorities.
Right.
Just like Amy's
Right.
getting the ball rolling here.
Well, I'll interact, you gave me guidelines, I'll talk with staff, and they can prep me for it, and
Sure.
I'll do what I can.
Sure.
I mean, I'm not gonna.
No, absolutely, and I will be
It'll just
meeting.
get started.
Yeah,
you
with
know?
Larry Kiker later in that day. Carl and I will be meeting. We're
Okay,
gonna
good.
actually be discussing the bridge and some other
Okay.
things moving forward, so.
All
Thank
right.
you for
Okay.
setting an appointment, and I would encourage others to do so as well. Fred, right, you got time?
No, one thing you gotta be aware of on that bridge, they'll look at operating costs, and the drawbridge has got personnel that have to sit there and run the bridge, cost of maintaining and all that, so it's gonna be there'll be a lot of pressure, but that's a good way to go.
Right.
The non-drawbridge is what I'm saying.
Great. Thank you, Amy, for bringing that up, and, so we're good? You've got?
We're good.
Okay, fantastic.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Do we want to hold off for other member reports at this time? We'll hold on to later. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, I do have one.
Yeah, okay.
These pictures you see here,
Yes, I see them.
this is rough conceptual, but Arlene and I and Matt met with Sam Vincent. This is his handiwork, and so this is the US 41 bridge, and this is whatever comes before preliminary. This is it, but it's a rough. You have this here?
Yep.
Yeah, it's just a rough conceptual idea of what Sam came up with, and you can see what he's chosen is a focus on the median, and picking up on the concept of dolphins, which we briefly talked about and which has been talked about, at the Art and Public Places Board. There's a lot that's not done here, and he's gone back, for example, treatment of what would be the barren parts of the median. But I just thought, since we can't, to keep council up to date, this is the kind of thinking that's going on, not engraved in stone, but any preliminary impressions would be appreciated.
Okay? I mean,
Is this
That's good.
Is this a fountain? Is that what it is?
Well, no, see, it probably, right, so he drew it as a fountain, but, part of our concern with having water there is ongoing maintenance costs of a fountain in the middle of a bridge. So, among the concepts we were talking about was perhaps just having the sprays go up, but with not a whole pool. That could be probably better maintained, things like that. But basically, I think my suggestion is to think about it as the rough concept is of dolphins in a sculpture.
Well, I just have a question about that. I think we talked about having some symbolic imaging.
Right.
So is the Art in Public Places advocating for the dolphin to be our image?
It was one of the two things that they had mentioned
They
that
had
came out of
mentioned,
there.
they had mentioned dolphins, turtles as concepts.
Turtles,
And at that point, it was handed to Sam to take a visionary of looking at the space, what could possibly go there. There are also discussions of not water, but using mosaic tiles and other elements that create the effect, the visual effect of the water. There's also sculpture that could also work as fountains, but we've been talking about making it look realistic as well. So this design is just in concept to get a feel from council. It still would then go through more process and more detail and back to the Art and Public Places Board.
I mean, my only I love dolphins, I love turtles, but our logo has a crane on it or something. We have some kind of a bird. What's the logo of the Bonita Springs?
Reading the gate.
That's a quiz.
Yeah.
No, I don't believe any specific animal was supposed to be identified in the logo. It was all conceptual, but yeah.
On our stationery, doesn't it? Does anybody have?
Picket
There's the picket
Fence and
fence,
a
and with
palm
the
tree.
palm tree and the sun.
Okay. Well, anyway, all I'm saying is that I would like consistency, so whatever we have on our logo and wherever we're going to put these signs, that we need to do that. But that would be a decision that a recommendation that would come out of the Art and Public Places. Is that correct?
Well,
Well,
yeah.
working with council and Art and Public
Okay,
Places.
because I think we need to focus in on that quickly, because all these things are coming up. We have something that we want to do at the interchange, and we're
Right.
talking about this, so we need to execute that.
We're racing Simmons on this. We're going to beat him on this one.
And then the only other thing, and I think I mentioned this, that I do think conceptually this is fine, but I would like to see those Jersey barriers opened up with a different kind of barrier there, because I do think that part of the aesthetic is the Imperial River, so let's look at it.
That's Matt Feeney's fault, those Jersey barriers.
I know, but you can have barriers that they don't have to be obstructive.
A few additional comments to Arlene's, and a big compliment to Sam for coming up with this.
Right.
Because originally I had been particularly talking about the railings on the side, which probably still could be replaced, and having something in them. And Sam said, well, you got your focal point is right in the middle. I mean, he didn't say, he said it more politely than this, but he was right. The focal point is in the middle, so let's focus on the focal point. So this would do that, and the railing would be replaced by, but we're hopeful, and Matt's looking into this, something more stock that's nicer, so it wouldn't cost us a lot more money. The Jersey barriers are an issue with respect to FDOT and crash ratings and all that kind of stuff. And we have had conversations about that, actually with Sam and Matt the other day as well. Is there a way to soften that look, perhaps paint it? And I thought, well, gee, if you paint it, it's going to look like a painted Jersey barrier. But maybe there are other treatments.
Stamp it.
Sorry?
Stamp it. Put stamps on it.
Yeah, maybe.
concrete
Yeah, maybe.
stamps.
And of course, we haven't talked about cost yet here, okay, on this. But Matt had a rough number on replacing the Jersey barrier, not cheap, unfortunately. So, but all of that, it all has to come together. I absolutely agree.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Good work.
Fred?
Well, a couple comment. Number one, on Jersey barrier, if we do anything with them, at least move them over 2 or 3 more feet.
Right.
Because that would be.
Fred, I'm sorry, in the microphone,
Oh,
folks are
yeah,
having a
yeah.
hard time hearing
Now,
you.
the other thing I want to remind, and this is, and we ought to look at this early rather than later after we have the design. If you were going to have a pond,
right,
make them just very few inches deep.
Right.
Because water has weight, and then all this big structure needs to be more or less hollow so it doesn't weigh
too much.
Because that's at the dead center of the span. So
Well, and we have our traffic engineer on
Yeah.
board now from the last meeting, so he's up on all that.
Good.
But yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay,
It looks
Cal-
good.
Yeah, no, it does.
You might do the thing of that Amy was talking about, the logo. You might be a way to using some kind of inlay, either inlay it in this blank median, maybe elevate it, or put it on maybe both sides of the fountain or the centerpiece, so to speak.
Okay.
Okay.
Anyhow, that's just an update on that. So,
Okay,
thank
great.
you.
Thanks.
Good job.
Anybody else on council right now, or do we want to move on to public comment? Hold our thoughts for
I'll
later.
save mine till later.
Okay. Let's move on to public comment at this time. Members of the public who'd like to speak, please come forward. Rick, how are you?
Oh, pretty good, Mayor. Rick Steinmeier. I'd like to thank Metro Diner, which is located in the center of Bonita Springs, next to the Verizon store. They had free meals, free lunch. All you had to do is have a reservation. They got tremendous food and lots of it. I recommend going there to eat. I understand they have 30 Metro Diners throughout the country. Started out of Jacksonville, Florida. So I'd like to thank them for serving Bonita. They had like 40 people working there, and they all come from Bonita. I don't know where they got all these unemployed young people, but they were all there. And now we talk about a historic village, but we have a McSwain house that was given to the Historical Society that we can't even get that up and running. There doesn't seem to be a whole lot of interest in spending money on the historical buildings. We're giving $40,000 to the Historical Preservation Board. Why don't we put $40,000 in the McSwain house and have something rather than a continued obligation with no taxes coming in? What would be a chance at Big Carlos Bridge, you're making that a toll bridge? You want to come from Fort Myers Beach into the Bonita Springs, you're going to pay. Why not? If you're going to build a new bridge, let them pay for it. So that's my ideas. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Rick. Kathy, hello.
Yes, hello again, Kathy McGrath. Unfortunately, I have some sad news to share with you. Some of you may be aware of it already. It concerns Roger Bradley. Roger passed away last Monday, May 8th. His services were Friday and Saturday. For those of you who didn't know it, Roger was director of LARC. He had a sister who was mentally handicapped, and he was he was an avid sailor. He was appointed to I've served with him on the Waterways Advisory Committee since I was appointed in 1992. He's been on it since 1989. He was an avid sailor and knew everything about the waterways, but it's very, very sad. He was a wonderful, wonderful man, and unfortunately, he just retired March 31st from LARC. So that just goes to show you he had maybe 1 month before he had this medical issue. So, live your life to the fullest as you can. And the only other thing I want to remind you is, of course, the gift of life, which is the donation of blood. I haven't mentioned this for a while, and some of you may already know. I'm a platelet donor. Right. You can donate platelets every 2 weeks. Your platelets are replenished every 72 hours, and I am blessed with an extremely high platelet count. Must be my clean living, I guess. But it is time consuming. It's 2.5 to 3 hours, and it can't be done on the buses. I've been doing it for 8 years. I go down to Naples Community Hospital, and platelets are needed for transplant, trauma, and chemo patients, desperately needed. And what they do is I just did it the other day. You lay there and they take your blood and they separate the platelets and give you your blood back. So not everybody can qualify and not everyone has the time to do that, but at least donate blood if you can. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Other members of the public? Morning, Martha.
Yeah, I
Hello
got 10
again.
items, so get your pens ready. But I'll read them from like top to bottom. Okay, the US 41 bridge, I'm glad you're looking at that. But as Councilwoman Karimba said, the most important thing there is the river. Two of my favorite places in Bonita, New Pass Bridge and the US 41, like when you're driving, because you've got this incredible vista, you know? I would suggest there, I mean, if you're going to do anything, I love the mosaic tile. Just make it look like the river goes through it, runs through it, whatever. And eagles, because we have eagles all over the place right there along the river. So, you know, national symbol, all that kind of stuff. Okay, 2, East Coast Rail. 3 RPCs, 3 MPOs, and 3 EDCs joined together to get that done. So, I mean, we're talking passenger rail, but it's going to take a regional effort. Thank you for bringing up those roads. I've thought about this interconnectivity between gated communities. Can the gated communities work together to allow like reciprocal passes for residents to go from one gated community to the other? Because that's really our interconnectivity problem here in Bonita Springs, is we've cut off, you know, we've got 70% of the city is gated. We've cut off that interconnectivity. So how can you keep them off the big road and in between their roads? We're going to have to build a bridge there. Hey, build the bridge. It's worth it. It's cheaper than building more roads. I like your conversation about the county tax. I think they should reduce our taxes, and I think they should let us collect the taxes, and they just take care of their little business in the unincorporated, and we'll take care of ours, because they seem to think that once we became a municipality, we're no longer part of the county. And other counties have looked at this and moved forward in that direction. So that regional park in Estero was built partly on Bonita Park impact fees, and it was supposed to be called Best Park, Bonita, Estero, San Carlos, Three Oaks, but they chose to call it Estero because they were pumping up Estero at the time. Your city conduct, council code of conduct has an admin policy which says that you all kind of have to come to a joint consensus about stuff if you're going to represent it to other people, you know, other government agencies, so look at that. And I'd like to see the mayor and council host other city councils here and have kind of a blowout, you know, here's Bonita Springs, and let them become familiar with what we do, and maybe they can go and they can have one and have us all up there, or have y'all up there. But I think that would be a good way to start working together, especially if you're dealing with the county and taxes, since there are more voters and municipalities in Lee County now than there are in the unincorporated county. And what do happen to the roads that the city didn't adopt that were owned by the county, but now they're kind of like abandoned? Can the county pay for those, like you were bringing up? Fort Myers Bridge. Larry Kiker would be very interested in that big Carlos Pass Bridge since it goes to Fort Myers Beach, you know, and he probably would get some county support on that. And last, I want to thank the mayor and the city council and Laura Taylor and the staff. Thank you, Carl, for being there. For Fiesta Bonita Springs, I think it was a huge success for 2 months or a month and a half preparing, and our first time out. I think people really enjoyed themselves, and I want to commend the mayor for moving ahead on that and bringing the city together.
Great.
Thank you, Mayor. You did a great job.
Thank you, Martha.
You bet.
Other members of the public wishing to speak at this time? Okay, seeing none, now we're going to move on to the city attorney's report. Audrey.
Thank you. I just have one item on the agenda this morning, and this is the issue regarding charter amendments. So you have heard now from the supervisor of elections. We now have a better idea of cost of elections. There were the 3 issues that I had researched, provided them to you in the memorandum, and I can answer any questions, and just waiting on direction from council. If you are keeping the 2018 election as is, the recommendation would then go at least 2020 for charter amendments, and then in May of May of 2018 is when you would then start setting up your charter review committee and creating that charter review committee who would then go over those issues, whether it's the ones I put in the memorandum or other issues that may be out there.
So I'm trying to maybe work my way up from the bottom here. We're clear the next election is in March?
As far as I understand, that's
Okay.
marching orders.
All right. Oh, no pun intended.
Oh, that is good. Yeah, it was not intended.
So we've only moved it back to January, having to do with presidential primary elections, right? That was the old back and forth.
I think.
January
right,
versus
but
March,
remember the
to piggyback.
presidential primary kept getting moved
Right,
also.
right.
That was.
So we were piggybacking on that, that's why that was going back.
Correct.
Okay, so with March. So what is the issue with bringing up charter amendments on that?
Well, there are some interest, or there was some interest at City Council on doing some charter amendments. Now, we are required under the charter to have a charter review committee review the charter and determine every 10 years,
Right.
based on the last time the committee was dissolved. And on those calculations, it would come out, we would need to set it up by 2018. Because
So
I
I'm sorry,
want-
so set it up by, that up by
set up
20.
the charter review, right, for
Okay.
2020. After we finish the 2018 elections, council is seated. We would then set up a charter review committee. That would be by resolution, as we set up all our committees. The charter review committee would meet, the last time we had the charter review committee, we hired a professor of political science from Professor Bergeron, I think his name.
Oh, sure.
From FGC.
Right,
From
from
FGCU, yeah.
And he led the committee and assisted them in figuring out what they wanted to change, what they didn't, and then if there were constitutional issues, I would do the research along with him giving advice.
So there's a requirement to do that
There is a
every 10
requirement
years.
to do that.
With a committee, every 10 years.
Every 10 years. The question is if you had some that you really felt you needed to do beforehand,
Right.
you could do it. Now, we did not know what the cost of a mail ballot was at time of original discussion. We now know that a mail ballot is actually more, and you could do the mail ballot at any time. A mail ballot, which is different than a voting ballot by mail, is much more expensive, which surprised everybody who researched it. And that was the price, that was $143,000.
So once again, just to understand, I'm not advocating for anything, I just want to understand. We could have this on the March 2018 ballot?
You could.
You could.
You would have to increase the precincts, and there would be the corollary
Right,
additional
well, no,
expense.
right, so cost is always an issue. I mean, so, but let's leave cost aside.
Okay.
I'm talking about the ability to do it or not.
Correct.
It can be done,
We could meet the time frame.
okay. And what would that be?
That would be any questions that City Council decided they would want on the charter.
Right.
Or as charter amendments.
Right.
So that's where I did the memorandum. I did the additional research after we did some scoping in February. If you remember, at the February 15th meeting, I said, hey, council, if you want to do something for the 2018 election, we need to get in gear for it
Right.
now. We obviously cannot set up a charter review committee within that short time. They would not be able to do the analysis. But you would definitely be able to take anything that you felt was very important, put it on, recognizing that when you have an election and it's not really affecting precincts, in other words, they're only coming in for the referendum, some people who might ordinarily vote for people might not be in attendance. So you may have stronger votes in 135, but 246 may be different. But that's a policy call, not a legal call.
And what is the timing of that? In other words, if council, so that council makes its own decision, it puts it to the population to vote on, what would have to be done by whom, by when, to
Okay,
get that on the March ballot?
So pursuant to the agreement that you entered into, we would need to have referendum questions drafted, read. They would need to be adopted by ordinance calling for the referendum.
Right.
The referendum, there would be at least 60 days, I think, I'm embarrassed, it's in the agreement for elections.
Okay.
But I believe it's 60 days, they would, the supervisor of elections would need it provided to them, at least in draft form, so they could start working on the referendum question, translating it into Spanish, so it would be properly formed. I would need some time to prepare it, and it would have to go, of course, to council for a first and second reading.
So the 60 days is probably the same as people who go on the ballot, probably that
Pretty
same
much.
cutoff. Yeah, it's early January. So working backwards, it would have, we would, if we wanted to do something, it would have to be done sometime in the late summer or early fall?
Correct.
Is that fair?
Mhm.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question. Yes, Amy.
This would still require that if we had a number of council approved questions, we still would have to have the constitutional committee, I mean, the charter revision committee, starting in August to do it, to meet the 2020?
No, you would, to meet, well, you could always call it in earlier, but I think once you set up the committee, it does take them a while to get oriented, be very familiar with the charter, question, and they actually hold debates amongst
No,
themselves.
but the question is, will we still be obligated to call that committee into authority? You said we have to do it every 10 years.
Right.
So if we had a referendum vote on a charter revision in March by the questions that council proposed, would we still be required to hold?
If you have a short committee, but I think that's a good question that I'm afraid, I wish I would be able to give you a better thoughtful
I
answer.
mean, if we're required to hold it every 10 years, it seems to me we still have to do it in 2020 through the other process.
Well, if you're holding it and they're just doing a short review of what council wants, that's one thing.
No, she's not asking that.
No,
I
I'm
think
asking the question. If we do it in March with the questions that we propose, and we get that over with, then are we still obligated to go?
Yes.
That's the question. Thank you.
And the charter obligates
The
us to do
charter.
that.
That's correct.
Okay, so charter.
Right,
So-
it's a
so-
self-determined, in fact, that was a charter amendment.
Unless you amend the charter, Greg.
That was actually done during the last charter review committee.
Oh, really?
And I remember, I think it was Councilman Ferrer who suggested it, so.
Great. Greg, did you have?
No, I was
question?
just saying, I mean, no matter what, we've got to formulate a committee, no matter how many times we
Next
review it
year.
or put it
Right,
on. We
next
still got to
year.
form a committee.
For 2020, and
2020.
right now, if you formed a committee, it'd be a very short meeting committee. I don't know how qualitative that could be.
Okay. So we're looking to provide direction here. Council?
Well, my view is, now that I understand, and thank you for that, Audrey. Now that I understand, I'd like to think about it.
Yeah, I mean, we've got
I
a
didn't
little
know-
time, but not a
we
lot
got
of
a
time.
little time, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You have the memorandum I provided. If you have any questions on that, I'll be happy to answer.
Fred?
One question on, if we as council do the thing where we put some things on in March, we don't have to create a committee to work on our stuff, do we?
No.
No, sir.
No.
I thought you kept talking
No.
about
No,
a
no,
short
no, no.
committee or something. thought-
I think the issue for that is whether we think the questions that we're advancing are of a critical
Right.
nature, so that we have to call in the vote from precincts other than the 3 that are already scheduled for the council.
Right.
That's really the issue.
What's cost?
Well, it's not only cost, it's just one of participation. I think that's more of an issue of whether we would get a full, across-city participation in any kind of referendum there.
Well, I think any charter review, we'd have to do all precincts.
Yeah, you're,
We're required, but if
Yeah.
you do it in March of 2020, they're going to come out for other reasons besides, and then they'll vote the question. I mean, I think that's how many voters do it, but we have, as Peter O'Flynn said, we have time to think about it. But
Yeah.
that would be something that I want to get my head around into.
and you're always going to have more participation when you have presidential primaries or something else
Correct.
going on. It helps.
Right.
And there are various, I mean, it's always good to have more participation, but you could make a lot of observations about that, one of which is if people are coming out for the presidential primary, are they really focused on the city matters anyhow? Which is unfortunate. It's unfortunate, but it's a fact.
Right. Okay, so,
Okay.
more time to
So-
ponder this
so
one?
when do you think
Yeah.
we should bring this forward again? How much time do we need?
Well, does anyone have anything now they'd want to bring up, or? I guess
Fred?
I mean, as far as.
Substance
One
of,
of the things you talked about is one of on the term limits.
Right.
And my only feeling on that is if we do it, it's got to apply.
Into
to
the
everybody.
microphone, Fred, sorry.
If we do it, it should apply to everybody, those that went before as well as those that go after. Which Audrey says that is legal to do that.
I was surprised, but, I mean, I went in there expecting the case law to be more static from when I had last researched the issue, and I was shocked about the changes.
It worked for President of the United States, so, yeah.
That's a political call, but
Right.
I was very surprised that before that was not the answer you would receive on this particular question, so.
Right, right. Now, I feel very strongly on the term limits. It's just a matter of, do we bring it up in 18 or in 20? You know, that's how I would handicap that. But no, I've made no secrets that I feel very strongly about that. Carl and I have had a conversation where he was from in Missouri, and not to pick on Naples, but even closer to home here in Naples, you know, you have people that they'll run, they'll reach their term limit, they'll sit out a term, or they'll drop back as mayor and jump into a city council seat, and then they'll run for mayor again. I don't, you know, I think our charter is very good in a lot of ways. Don't want to handicap or pick on anybody, but I think that's one area that they didn't think about. Land of unintended consequences with term limits, and I think, you know, to have progress in a city, you need fresh minds and fresh people involved.
It's almost, I mean, I can see both sides of it, but it's almost a misnomer to call that a term limit.
Right,
I mean,
right.
it's basically, you've got a term and a gap, and you come back, and you can do that for the rest of your life. You could start at the age of 20 and do it for 60 years.
Right.
It's not really a term limit, it's just a gap.
Just a gap, right?
Yeah.
I'm in favor of having some kind of word about term limits, but I would like to see total service. I don't believe in the gap. You know, maybe 12 years or of total service, no matter what it is, having to do with the council and the mayor. I think I would approve it. And then it's just a matter of how urgent that is, whether we need to do it in March or of 18 or do it in 220. In regard to the one that I was interested in, supermajority, I mean, we have that possibility to pass that as a resolution. And so I personally, and hopefully that will pass, but we don't know yet whether we're going to pass that, because we have a public hearing coming up, right? But if we pass as a resolution, then we could formalize it with a charter revision. So I don't see any urgency in March of 2018 for that one. And compensation, I can understand why there, you know, I don't think there's an urgency there. We still need to figure out, I mean, maybe people would disagree with me, but we could, I think there probably be some recognition of how we compensate the council and the mayor. But we probably could live for a couple more years, and it's not going to hurt us too much. So the only urgent, and I don't even have a feeling about that, would be the term limits, and I rely on people that have had more experience on the council.
Yeah, I don't know, just for the sake of conversation, if I buy onto the term of urgency.
Excuse me?
I don't know if personally, if I buy on to urgency as a standard. And the reason I say that is, we're talking about an amount of money here. I mean, there was, we probably talked about this, what is $50,000 for a half an hour, and, you know, 3 years ago, City Council didn't talk at all about $1 million payment for a road up on Burn Pine Drive. So I think sometimes we can become very fiscally conservative on a penny-wise point. I'm not addressing to you, but I'm just saying that. And, you know, the pounds go by.
Penny wise, pound foolish,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I mean, to me, is do what makes sense.
And then the other question is, would you want that to be an actual election? Now, hear me out, this may be a little confusing. Would you want that at March 2018, or knowing that it's more expensive, go to a mail ballot, so then people would be precluded as of March 2018's election?
Well, I don't know what mail,
What do you
how did mail come into this? The question was simply asked.
Okay, it was asked,
Huh,
so,
that makes
so
sense.
here's the thing. You can have your static dates, whether you move the dates or not, and that's one of the few things incidentally in charters city council can make amendments without needing to go to referendum, is election dates. Just trivia for you guys. As far as a referendum question, if the issue is term limits and you want to effectuate it earlier rather than later, for example, the 8 is enough or 12 is enough or whatever amount of time frame, you may want to have it in time before people could qualify so that you are able to then give them notice that its application would apply to the March 2018 election, but recognizing that's going to cost potentially $150,000.
Mr. Mayor, if I might.
Sure, Carl.
So first off, I might suggest that, I mean, given the fact that we've heard concerns today about possible issues that could go on the ballot, that we take some additional time for the council to consider not only additional issues, but also timing and those kinds of things. I might suggest that maybe the second meeting in June would still give us plenty of time. If it pleased the council, I just recommend we bring this back with a green sheet. The second meeting in June, we can talk about the issues, we can talk about timing, we can talk about costs, and get all those things resolved. I also would like to suggest, too, that the issue of compensation, I know elected folks never like to talk about compensation, but I want to submit to you that the wording in the current charter right now is really not applicable to what this city does anymore. Because our compensation system is based on merit instead of across the board, then possible increases for your time in service are not likely to occur very often, if at all. And so I just may want to suggest that there have been circumstantial changes in the way we operate that really are not reflected in the charter. So just something else for you to think about. So if you're comfortable with just kind of taking a month and taking a look at this, we can certainly schedule that on the second meeting in June.
Right. I think that point's well taken. I think that time frame fits in nicely. Gives us 30 days. And
Okay.
Okay, is that all right, council?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you, Audrey. Anything else?
No, sir.
Okay, city managers report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First off, I just have the monthly review of capital projects. We've submitted that report. We stand by for any questions you might have on that. And
Council?
if not,
No?
okay. So I just want to recognize the fact that the YMCA this week held a ribbon cutting ceremony for the new pickleball courts there. Quite a facility, as you know, and thanks to council for participating in that project to the tune of $150,000 as a partner to the YMCA in providing more pickleball opportunities in the city of Bonita Springs. So we thank them for all the work they've done. We thank you for providing some additional money in that project to make that happen. We expect that facility to be very busy and very successful over time. With that, unless there's questions or comments about that, Arlene's got one item as well.
Yes, good afternoon. The local chapter of the Florida Planning and Zoning Association for the state of Florida will be hosting this year's annual conference, and we're excited about the opportunity to showcase our downtown with a mobile workshop that will be conducted with Director Matt Feeney and our consulting team with Wright Construction, and then Jay Sweet will be also giving some insight on the rate of return and the matching grant program that we've been able to offer. And I believe the mayor will also be joining us for a quick welcome to those planners as well. Additionally, the city has been nominated along with Waldrop Engineering, Florida Gulf Coast University, and McMahon Associates for the and Tool Design Group for the good work we've done on the Bonita Beach Road vision in totality, and especially the fact that we partnered with Florida Gulf Coast University to provide educational opportunities. The award ceremony will be on the 9th of June. We will find out if we are a recipient.
Great, thank you.
That's all we have, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Okay, mayor and council member reports. Amy? You're good? Okay, very good. Greg?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, Peter?
It's not a report, but just a note on something which is I'm thankful for, Carl. So we're going to have a workshop before the next meeting on whatever we're looking to see from staff on the budget. Is that right?
June 7th.
June 7th.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Now, we expect that to be very high level.
Right.
And really kind of get the expectations of the council with regards to projects, individual items, those kinds of things. Yes.
Or presentation of the budget.
Yes.
Yeah.
We'll have soft numbers by then, right? They come
Pardon
out
me?
June. We'll have soft numbers by then.
No.
They come in June 1st?
Not in June. We'll present a full budget to you. It'll be late June or early July, because July 7th is the actual workshop for
Right.
the big budget. June, we're looking for input from you.
Okay.
Yeah.
But in June, we should have the soft numbers from the county. It says right now.
Yeah, I'm sorry, sir. Yes,
Yes.
we will have soft numbers from the county's appraiser's office on assessed value and what that means in terms of ad valorem
Got you.
taxes.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Oh, and where did we end up on our legislative priorities, the two?
Both of them were referred to committee and never made it out of committee.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Okay.
All right.
However, there is, this was one of your priorities, however, not one of the two
Right.
funding requests. There was a third funding request, which was for the visitor center at Lover's Key, and that is in the budget, fully funded to complete the project. So as long as the governor signs that and everything's good, that will be a project that will come out of the ground.
And did they pass a higher homestead exemption? I lost track of that one. Do you know? They did.
It's referendum.
Yeah, it's referendum. You have
Oh,
to
it's
have a vote,
referendum.
hold
Oh,
a vote.
interesting.
Yes.
Okay, that'll pass.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks, Peter. Mike?
No, Carl brought up the pickleball courts, and after our meeting on Monday, I made it over there, not in time for the ribbon cutting, but at least to see the presentation. And they had two pros out there showing, or actually 4 pros out there showing everybody how to play. And I was always led to believe that pickleball was a pretty easy sport. But the way they were playing, it was very intimidating looking, and I don't think I could keep up. But there was a good number of people out there watching the presentation, and immediately following, pretty much every court was full. So they're in use. So there was good money, or well money spent. So
Great. Thanks.
and then the only other thing is, so we have the workshop coming up, but I was just wondering when we're going to do the downtown workshop, and in relation also to bamboo property and 11 property RFPs.
Right.
And
We have, based upon our discussion at the last meeting, we have 3 or 4 that are probably more priorities than the other longer list. We can hold the downtown workshop as quickly as council wants to have, and if that means at the next meeting, we can certainly do that, because we're going to try to fit these, unless council wants to do it differently, we're going to try to fit these in to a council meeting as opposed to taking additional time to do it. So,
yeah, well, with the downtown project coming to an end in early fall,
needs to happen
we
soon.
need to
Yep.
get it done soon. So
We'll get on it.
Great. Thank you. Fred?
Yeah, I wanted to bring up what the meeting that we had at zoning on Monday. And actually, I think some potential good came out of some things that weren't so good. I wanted to see what council thought of this concept. I know that, in particular, Councilman O'Flynn has asked for community development when something comes up in zoning to present both sides and all that, and that's being done. And what I suggested is this. Well, first of all, Jay Sweet, for those of us that were there, gave really a very good presentation on fairly short notice on how things should be to better fit with, he called it the comp plan vision, because the Bonita Beach Road vision hasn't been fully sanctified. But he gave a very good presentation, and all I would like to do, and I talked to John Domer, and he said they can do it. In fact, he thought it was a good idea. I've discussed it with Audrey. But we really have some very competent planners on staff. When we get into this thing of proposed uses, and I got euchred into a bait and switch on that, and I'll take part of the responsibility, but I was told one thing by the planners and the developer, and that's all they said they were going to do, and that is not what they proposed. But what I suggested to John, I said, you know, all of us that are sitting at the dais, a lot of these uses don't have as much meaning as you think they do because they're not very well defined. But I said, you planners know what they are. And I said, why can't we get a presentation which would say of the proposed uses by the applicant, we feel that the following uses should not be approved because they either would impact the vision of the comp plan. They might actually, there's another thing in the comp plan about uses and things that are being approved are supposed to be compatible with what has come up and grown up in that area since the original thing, the zoning or the land use was developed for that area. And I think that having that as part of the presentation by community development would be good. I told John, I said probably council will not go along with all of your recommendations, but even if they accepted a third or a half, that's a good step forward. So I wanted to see what the rest of council thought about.
Well, Fred, I was here, and actually, I think I even used the term bait and switch. So sometimes, yeah, what seems clear is not necessarily apparent, or what discussions are based on somehow may get lost. And I mean, not that but there was 3 hours worth of presentations. Right, on Monday. We got out about the same as this meeting. Think about that, right? So
yeah, but we didn't have from staff what things they felt could have or should have been deleted from that list, and that's all I'm asking for.
Right.
And I think it would have, I'm sure that if we all heard from our staff that certain uses they feel would not be compatible with some things, it would have a bearing on some of us on how we vote.
Well, and I'll finish my thought, and then Pete, we can, sometimes these presentations are so lengthy, you can't see the forest through the trees. It's almost like you need an abridged version. I hate to say it, but I'm first one to say, hey, you give me a 2-hour presentation, okay, that's impressive, right? But give me a 20-minute presentation, give me the nuts and bolts and the bottom line, that might be kind of effective too. So I don't know if that's what you're saying, Fred, but...
Well, I am. I'm saying they're going to do a lot of the work for you. Doesn't mean you have to agree with them, because we've many times not followed the staff recommendation. But it's useful, and even though generally other things prevent us from following presentation made by Jay Sweet, his presentation was very good.
Yes, right, without a doubt. And then I hate to say, right, but the bottom line recommendation of staff, what is the bottom line recommendation?
Right.
Lay it on us.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Peter?
Just a related question, John, if you might. So we had agreed a while ago that Theriac and Spain, whoever the appropriate people there are, would be engaged with community development, I think you told me, from the beginning on zoning applications. So when is that in place now?
Yes, sir.
And is the next thing that's going to go to the zoning board been
It
through
doesn't
that?
look like that. I know that the last
Doesn't
time we
look-
had talked, I wasn't sure which one would be found sufficient and how things were going to shake out. And there was a possibility that one of those that had been involved in the beginning could. However, what I think we're looking at now are applications that have been submitted prior to their direct involvement that will be going to hearing. But we have implemented that. They are working very closely with us on everything that's in our department.
Well, how many are there any that are not going to have their full involvement that are going through now?
Full involvement from
yeah.
prior to submittal to hearing date, there are going to be, in fact, I think the next two are going to have been submitted prior to their direct involvement in all aspects.
So what is their involvement with respect to those?
They picked up the applications where they were in the process. So when we had that discussion that they are now involved, from that moment on, everything from correspondence to staff reports to direct conversations on approach. They have been involved in all of those.
How
There was
about-
just a period of time where they weren't involved prior to that.
How about their legal view with respect to the form of what's being presented as contrasted, as held up against the requirements of our code? Is that in place?
Yes,
now, with respect to?
Yeah, and in addition to that, they are reviewing everything even prior to the staff report. So they're looking at our letters for additional information, regardless of whether it's sufficiency or RAIs, depending on the type of application, but also through the staff reports that are then presented to you as well.
Right. But specifically, my question is what's coming forward in terms of a master concept plan, in terms of the presentation, in terms of the narrative, held up against the requirements of Section 3 of our code, and check, that meets that. Are they doing that now with respect to everything that's going to come before the zoning board?
Yes.
Okay.
And we, like I said, we give them everything. So there is nothing that we are bringing forward that
from here on out.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
And then once we get to that point, I know we've had this discussion. Once they've gone through a few of these applications from soup to nuts, they can figure out, okay, this is where we need to be involved. This is what we need to do.
That's the high-class problem.
Correct. Correct.
Great, thanks, John. Any
Thank
other
you.
questions for John? Amy?
I don't know for John, but just a question about what Councilman Forbes brought up. If you're suggesting, if I understand how the law is required here, if we have acceptable uses, how can we say that we only like half of them for a particular application? Is that allowed?
Yes. When you are reviewing a zoning application, they're before you because what they would like is not currently permitted. If it was currently permitted, they wouldn't need to come through a public hearing process. So they are asking for some sort of entitlement or some sort of approval from you. And with plan developments, it includes a plan, includes uses, it includes conditions, and those are all to be measured according to your comprehensive plan and your land development code, which should have your visions for either particular corridor or the city as a whole. If you feel that uses, setbacks, certain things that are requested as part of that application are not consistent with your comprehensive plan, your land development code, or those overlay districts, then you can remove them or modify them. That includes uses, that includes anything that is in that document. So when we present something to you, I think we've had a high-level discussion on this. We have been dealing with and negotiating and reviewing these applications for months. So and I think Councilman Forbes had talked about uses. Through the process for the hearing that you had on Monday, there were multiple uses that were removed from the application that never even made it to the public hearing because we had told the applicant we do not believe that these are appropriate, we're not going to recommend approval, and they then removed them. However, that does not limit this council's authority when you approve or approve with modifications or requests that comes before you to modify that. And if, I know that we're still fine-tuning our presentation because what I want is not just simply give repeated 2-hour conversations to this council, but I want to get the substance of a potential approval or denial. And I want you to understand what the impacts of that are. So we are shifting where our focus is. We're trying to bring certain things to the forefront, maybe cover certain things in the staff report. But this is very helpful. If there's something that you would like to see, we are more than happy to do it because I would much rather spend our time on things that are either one, important to you, or two, truly going to have an impact, as opposed to simply providing slide after slide that shows code consistency or non-compliance, but doesn't really have an impact on your debate. So uses are something that we're in the staff report, we're in the application, we're on the master concept plan. It was not like those were not brought out as part of the request. However, if it is easier, and believe me, I have no issues with this, if it's easier to look on the slide and state for parcels 1 through 3, the applicant wishes to have the following uses, and you look through there and you don't think several of those are appropriate, That is the purpose of this public hearing. That's the purpose of our debate. So going through whether those particular uses or a particular setback or particular height, that's why we're here.
Yeah, and there are also issues about, that confound things, about laundry lists of uses as applied to the concepts of a planned development, which are supposed to at least make an attempt to get into what the knock-on effect of any individual use would be. And I think a lot of that's getting lost in the shuffle, is my own view.
And part of
Because,
that-
you know, you can look at a thing and say, well, maybe there's a yarn store, maybe there's a Walmart, maybe there's this, that, and the other thing. But the PD zoning is supposed to take into account not just the concept, oh, gee, I like the notion of a yarn store. It's what is the effect in that area with respect to that? And, you know, this gets into this whole concept of bubble zoning that we've talked about, and the concern among not a small amount of people in town, which is, what are we essentially doing? Taking a laundry list from the comp plan and just throwing that into the administrative process? What's the purpose of the zoning process? So these are kind of fundamental concepts.
Agreed. And I think that what you're seeing is a shift in philosophy, because what you saw before, and I'm not saying good, bad, or indifferent, but what you saw before was someone taking uses from a zoning district, putting them into a planned development, plus whatever it is they particularly wanted above and beyond that. And that was considered acceptable for a number of years. It's obviously clear that that is not acceptable, and changing that is not a problem. But in terms of the laundry list, we will be fine-tuning how that is handled, because what you want to do is provide the flexibility where similar type uses can be included in the approval. However, those uses that have a different or particular impact are evaluated separately. So,
But now you're onto, once again, a higher class problem. We're nowhere near that, addressing that problem.
correct. But I think I don't think we're necessarily that far away, but I won't say we're there.
Okay.
Council, if you will remember during the hearing, we were talking about automobile Group 1 and Group 2, and the applicant says, well, I need to have diesel, be able to do diesel with other automotive, and that's a Group 2 use, and I need to have a tire store. So at that point, the schedule of use was limited per council to allowing Group 2 limited to diesel and autos, tires, or tire stores. What might benefit council, because the plan was created, or the Land Development Code, Chapter 4, was created with bubble plans in mind. So, I mean, we would need to wholesale change the code, which we need to do.
I'm not suggesting that.
No, but let me finish.
Right. All right.
And what we need to do is probably give you just one section of the code, which is something Alexis worked on last year, early this year, 4-408, which is our use groups. And then if you have those use groups, and you can see what Group 1 entails, what Group 2, and if you see uses that are offensive, you put excluding those uses. If you find uses in that list that you only want one or two uses, and the applicant says, I'm only using it for that one, do that. Because the worst, or the example I would use is right near Imperial River, there was a storage which would include boat storage, but it also, dry docks, but it also included a regular storage facility. And it was sold to the city that was going to be boat storage, and that was not limited to boat storage. And of course, they changed it to the use. So what I'm saying is there is a bait and switch situation that may occur. If somebody's in a meeting, you may hear the vision that you want to hear, not necessarily the actual thing that's going to be in the ground at the time.
So there are provisions in the code that any reasonable person, just reading the English language, would consider is not consistent with the concept of a big bubble plan. So I'm not into getting into that today, but that's part of the reason, just for good order, that I'm asking about if we have the council working with you to look at this.
And yes, so I understand, and they are.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, John. Anything else? Fred, anything else on that?
No,
Wrap-up thoughts, or?
No,
No, because
well,
it's a great point, and thank you for bringing it up.
Yeah, I'm assuming that if no one objects, the next items that come to us, we'll have that from staff on any of the, and by having it ahead of time, it gives us a chance to look at it and study it too.
Right. Right. Great. Okay. I guess that would leave me. I just, we've touched on Fiesta Cinco de Mayo celebration, and we pulled that together nicely, with Univision, and it really was literally within a month or 6 weeks. And, we had that Diversity Outreach Committee come together, and I can just tell you that people are supercharged. I mean, they feel part of the community. They feel, I don't want to say alive, but they feel alive. They feel like this is our city and a part of it. And, we did have a lot of sponsorships. I just want to take a minute to read them. We had CenturyLink, the Bonita Boat Center, the Coconut Hyatt Hotel, the Naples Fort Myers Track. I see Izzy Haveneck back there. Thank you very much. Fifth Third Bank, Lake Michigan Credit Union, Arthrex, the Wilbur Smith Law Firm, Seminole Casino, Amigos Auto Insurance, Suncoast Credit Union, Transamerica, Aki Mikado, Lansdowne Street, La Rancherita, Felipe's Taqueria. I'm probably butchering these pronunciations. I apologize. Anito Simas, Dylan's Skettler, Royal Prestige, and Juan Romero had a vending there. So thank you very much. We raised $25,000. Not only am I proud of the event that we pulled off, I think we need to look at this as a potential funding model for events moving forward. Private-public partnership, I think we need to look at that. And I will be, as Carl knows, discussing that on this summer's budget. How do we fund our events in the park? Is it strictly public, or is it strictly private, or some combination of the two? So I think that whole approach needs a fresh look, and I'm looking forward to that discussion. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Council, for your participation. I know a couple of you weren't able to be there, but 5 of the 7 council members were there, and it was a fantastic day, and it was also, I think, the sloppiest Kentucky Derby I've ever seen, but in recent memory. But it was a fun day. We had the Kentucky Derby down there, so thank you for that. There is an event here, but I think I need some more details. But there is, Amy, an opening down your way, which I guess is the Estero side. But there is going to be.
Tomorrow. It's the Health Village, or whatever.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Actually, there is that event as well. Which is right, the Lee Park, the Health Village. That's tomorrow morning.
That's at 9 o'clock.
And
what do you?
No, and there's another event down your way that's going to be at Altera, at the Colony. Right, and that's going to be on the 28th in the evening. But I don't have all the details on that. But I just kind of want to put that on everybody's radar screen
I think that there's going to be a video by Laura has something going at Altera. I don't know what the date is.
Okay.
What's the date for that?
Is it the 28th, Laura? No. I'm sorry, that might be something different. I apologize.
Laura Taylor, Communications Director. The filming that we were going to do was just an option for you to go for your district.
I thought you were doing it separately.
Yeah, it was a separate, totally separate thing. So it's not the same as the event.
Yeah, okay. All right, thanks.
Amy, you have tomorrow at 9, not 9:30 for Coconut Hospital thing? Coconut.
I have it at 9:30, but
I have it at 9:30.
Sometimes I put it on early, so I'm
Yeah.
not late.
Okay.
But I have it on for 9.
Don't worry, sometimes I put it on the wrong day.
Yeah, well, I do that too.
But I do believe that's tomorrow at 9:30. And just want to mention that there are some things going on in town, as we know, and let's, Peter mentioned earlier, penny wise and pound foolish. Look, we're chugging on a lot of cylinders here. I can't say all cylinders because there's always room for improvement, but we're doing a great job. You guys are involved. You're doing a lot of work. We're all doing a lot of work, and that's showing, that's reflective, and we're getting a lot of things done here. I look forward to a great budget process this summer to see what we can improve on, things, maybe some fresh ideas of what we can do and ways to make Nichols dance a little bit further than they have in the past, because, we've got some realities coming down the pike, but I'm looking forward to that, and I just you know, as I've said before, want to commend council and the team here for what we're doing. So thank you for your hard work. Thank you very much with that. And now we are going on to the approval.
Peter,
Yes.
I just want to, well, thank you for your leadership too. But one thing I forgot was the National Day of Prayer and the prayer breakfast that we attended, because maybe one of the reasons that we're finding success is that we have a lot of people supporting us either through their prayers or through their efforts and their research, and I appreciate that support and give credit to the consortium of pastors that set that up.
Yes, yes, indeed. That was a nice event. Thank you for mentioning that.
And as far as the
Amy.
fiesta is concerned, when you do the planning for next year, my suggestion to think about is not to have it so close to Cinco de Mayo, because we already have a venue by which we can celebrate the Hispanic heritage. And we should have it another time, you know, maybe later, where we can just focus on that event as a special celebration.
Right.
But, you know, that's one person's opinion.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All thoughts and opinions are welcome. Absolutely. Thank you. Anything else, council? Okay, approval of the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
So moved in a second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mayor Simmons.
Aye.
Councilman O'Flynn.
Aye.
Councilman Gibson.
Aye.
Councilman Forbes.
Aye.
Councilwoman Caramba.
Aye.
Councilman DeWitt.
Aye.
Okay, great. Public comment. Members of the public that'd like to speak, please come forward.
Yes, Rick Steinmeier. I approached Commissioner of Elections Tommy Doyle when he was leaving and asked him specifically, how long is it before the election does a referendum have to be put on the ballot? I brought to him, and he said 120 days. Now, our conversation here was 60 days. There's a big difference there. I thought maybe we ought to check that out, whether it's 120 days or 60 days.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you, Rick.
Alex.
Yes, Alex Grant again on passenger rail service. One last comment. I'd like for you to remember that probably at the next U.S. Census, we are going to have a lot more people in Southwest Florida. I'm talking right now, we probably have 700,000 people in Lee County, 400,000 people in Collier County, and a couple 100,000 in Charlotte County. By 2020, that will be increased. I have a customer that was in contact with the with the Collier County Sheriff, and he projected a permanent population in Collier County by 2025 of 900,000 people. So we have a lot of people that are going to be in this area. It would certainly support passenger rail service in this area. So that will be coming up very quickly within the next 4 or 5 years. So please do remember that railroad track will be used for passenger rail service quicker than anyone thinks. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Hello, Martha.
Always fun to be down here. I won't come as much, though. Okay, so term limits. If you want to view what the original charter committee, the incorporation committee, when they wrote our charter, thought about that, I turned in a video. Greg was here, Kathy was here, I was here, Alex was here. I don't know if anybody else in this room lived here when the original charter was written. Rick Steinmeier was here.
Oh, Rick
Mary. Probably Mary, right? Mary? No, not Mary. Okay, so I would call what we have limited term limits, but limiting them any further, and not because like I'd want to run again or anything, but because like our founders in this country, there was a big debate about that. There was a big suggestion that you can only run once to be in Congress or, you know, president, whatever, and they lost. Because the feeling was that in a representative democracy for our republic, that really the most important thing was the voice of the people and the voice of the voters. If the voters choose to vote in Sammy Hamilton down in Everglades City for the last 45 years or ever how long he's been down there, that's their choice. So why are you limiting their choice? And yes, I understand, like, they're career politicians and all that kind of stuff, and it's annoying, but really, the citizens get the government they elect. You know, and if they're not involved enough to get that bum out or whatever, that's their fault. And leave it up to them. All right? Some of us might not like it, but really we are a representative democracy in its purest form. So, as a republic. So, the other thing I would say about that is you lose institutional knowledge. Fresh blood is a great quote, but you also lose, you have to retrain people all the time. I mean, that's why we have experienced staff here in the city, because they understand how things operate, you know, and anyhow, that's my 2 cents on that. I really think that what we have, if you want to view the conversation of the Incorporation Committee, sorry, Alex, but I gave those videotapes to the city, and they're in the city vault, wherever that is. Okay, next. Your charter review is going to look at maybe how you compensate council. I'm sorry, Carl, but I think we've been operating against our charter for the last several years because we are on a merit-based system. And it says the council will get compensated, and council voted for it, so it's their fault. But council only gets compensated, increased compensation, if you vote for a COLA for your employees. So when you went away from a COLA system to a merit-based system, you violated your charter. I didn't vote for that, okay? All right, so something else. Oh, I also want to thank Ms. Karumba. And recognize, I don't know, is he still here? Nope, he left.
No, that was my lunch date.
My original council member, not Mike Gibson, not David Piper, was Jim Karumba. Give me a sec, would you?
Yeah.
My father used to take me, I lived across the street from our city hall, village hall, in Ridgewood, New Jersey, where I was born and raised. And my first council member, my dad used to take me down to the town hall meetings, hard wood pews, give me a lifesaver, and like, shut up, kid. And Jim Karumba was my council member. And I think that's the coolest thing.
Yeah.
We're kind of like full circle, you know?
When
and I
was
haven't.
that?
Did you know that?
I did know that.
Yeah, that's so cool. And
What year was that, Martha?
way back when.
Oh, sorry, yeah, right.
Way back when.
Way back when.
Before I
Okay,
was
and the last thing I'd like to say is, so thank you, Jim Karumba and Karumba family, for continuing to be involved in your communities. Last thing I'd like to say is, on your legislative priorities, you did recognize Izzy Havenick here. Their family has been involved in Bonita Springs since 1959, owning that property. And as your author of the city resolution to have slots to bring to Lee County, which I passed through the city manager because I wanted to get passed, so it didn't have my name on it, right? Remember that, Carl? Yeah. Yes. That's a trick if you want to get something passed, by the way. Keep that in mind. Just put it through him. Okay, so please support slots on your legislative agenda. 67% of the county's voters voted to have that, but I think it was even higher in Bonita. I have to go back and look at that. But they're an integral part of our downtown redevelopment. And we also signed an agreement to get some money out of that for the city. So if you're looking for nickels and dimes, that's big dollars. So thank you, sir.
Great, thank you, Martha. Other members of the public? Seeing none? Oh, excuse me. It was that T-shirt comment, you know. I'm sorry.
I take that back.
Okay,
Erase
no
that
worries.
comment. Kathy McGrath. No, I echo Martha's thing about supporting the Izzy and the slot machine thing. I mean, you know, get after the legislature. No, I just want to remind everyone about the Memorial Day service.
Right.
It's so important to honor our veterans and our present military, past, present, future. So Riverside Park at 9 o'clock. Okay.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Kathy. Other members of the public wishing to speak? Okay, seeing none, motion to adjourn?
Moved.
We are adjourned.